I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Kenmore Planning Commission, Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, to order. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Commissioner LaSalle,
Present.
Commissioner Macias,
Here.
Commissioner Olson,
Here.
Commissioner Dorian,
Here.
Commissioner Vanderland,
Here.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Here.
Chair Banashinsky.
Present. Okay, we will now have a land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhuatl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working toward a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land.
Please join me in standing for the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
All right, the next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone signed up for public comment tonight?
There is currently no one signed up for public comment, online or in person.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
so moved.
Do we have a second? Okay, there's a motion and a second. We'll do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is the public hearing on middle housing regulations. So before this public hearing, get my notes up here. Staff will give a short presentation to set the stage for our public hearing on middle housing and inclusionary zoning code amendments. After the public hearing, staff and consultants will address the written comments we received ahead of the public hearing and in-person public testimony as preparation allows. We will then hold a discussion among commissioners and make our recommendation to City Council. The final recommendation will be by motion, second, and roll call vote. We will then prepare for a presentation to City Council at their April 21st meeting. I'll turn it over to staff and consultants at this time for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Commission members. I'd like to turn it over to Nick Chen, who's going to run through a PowerPoint presentation just to provide context for the public hearing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of Planning Commission. It's good to see you all again. Tonight we'll be going through the city's requirements for House Bills 1110 and 1337. 1110 is for middle housing and 1337 is for accessory dwelling units. So we'll do a quick brief overview of the project so far. We'll cover kind of start to finish to give a recap of what we've done so far and the discussions that we've had. We'll cover a summary of the proposed amendments. A full list of the amendments made to the city's code or proposed to the city's code was listed in the packet. So high level, as I mentioned, House Bill 1110 addresses middle housing requirements the city needs to meet by June 30th in order to fulfill the state's requirements for adding additional housing in primarily single family areas. If the city does not adopt regulations for House Bill 1110, the model ordinance will apply following June 30th. Some very high level requirements. Essentially, it allows 6 of the 9 housing types for Tier 2 jurisdictions. In a second, we'll go through the different tiers. At least 2 units per lot for the unit lot density standard, and at least 4 units when you have the increased unit density standard, which applies either when you're near a major transit stop or meets certain affordability requirements. In 2024, the population for Kenmore was just under 25,000. The tier thresholds are under 25,000 for tier 3, between 25 and 75,000 for tier 2, and for above 75,000 is tier 1. At a joint meeting, the Planning Commission and City Council decision was made to go with the tier 2 requirements because Kenmore is so close to that 25,000 threshold in terms of population. So that's how we proceeded going forward. Project timeline, comprehensive plan amendments were originally made to housing and land use elements in 2022, but middle housing regulations were not adopted at the time. Council requested more community engagement. In 2023, the Framing the Future of Housing process kicked off in Kenmore, and our final report was at the end of 2023 in September. Just at the end of last year, part of the comprehensive plan amendments, recommendations, and ultimately revisions to some of the policies were adopted for the housing and land use elements to keep consistent with state law. And then in 2024, we also held an open house in this very room and participation at farmers markets, website updates, and a couple other materials as part of the Middle Housing Code update process. In 2024 and 2025, we also worked with Development Services and Public Works to get their comments on code revisions and how that may impact the processes that they have in place. Planning Commission held a number of meetings to develop and refine code amendments. And then here we are today at the Planning Commission hearing to receive community comments and feedback on proposed amendments to the city code. So House Bill 1110 was passed by the legislature in 2023, and here are just a couple, again, the summary of some of the things that are proposed recommendations for the code. It requires Kenmore to adopt housing policies and implement regulations to allow middle housing types in primarily single-family residential zones. After a lot of discussion, Planning Commission decided to move forward with 6 of the 9, which is the requirement, those being duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, stacked flats, courtyard apartments, and cottage housing. Also, the broad decision was made to maintain the base development standards for single family in those areas with a couple of density incentives and things like that that we'll cover in the next stage. As part of the code update, we also added definitions for the new permitted housing types listed above, where they didn't exist in the code currently. Major transit stops was defined, parent and unit lots for the unit lot subdivision process were defined, and then a new standard for unit density was defined as well. Here's a couple of the housing types that we just discussed. As you can see, there's just sample imagery. There are a number of different components to how these could all come together, and depending on lot size and number of other characteristics, the ultimate characteristics of them. So a little bit more, we established a unit density standards. This is 2 units per lot or 4 units per lot if you are within a certain distance of major transit stops, or a housing project provides at least one affordable housing unit that meets the standard requirements established in the code for term, affordability levels, covenants, and deed restrictions, and those such. We also established parking requirements for these new middle housing types as they didn't exist previously. We also, after discussion, Planning Commission decided to move forward with an approach in terms of where middle housing would apply. So under the kind of standard process, it would apply in all primarily single family zones, that being R1, R4, and R6. After the discussion about where these may be most impactful, Planning Commission actually decided to go with what's called the alternate to density requirements. This is being able to allocate at least 25% of the city, or up to 25% of the city before Commerce needs to review and approve where the requirements would not apply. The methodology that was chosen essentially was to exclude R1 areas and areas in R4 adjacent to waterways, because these are sensitive habitat and critical areas. Additionally, these requirements do not apply on portions of any lot that have critical areas or critical area boundaries. So one distinction that was made as we were going through this process was initially that meant that an entire lot was excluded. Commerce revised the guidance and the code to essentially say it's just portions of lots that have critical areas now. So very similar to how single family development could occur on those lots today. I did talk a little bit about the public benefit and development incentives. 2 weeks ago, we walked through all of these to just get some final feedback, and we ended up removing a few of them These essentially are to promote a variety of housing types, increase flexibility in development, and promote smaller unit types, and also retaining existing primary units. Those were some of the key factors established by the Planning Commission in terms of developing these. So these incentives, as you go through, are really aimed at hitting those as goals. So increasing flexibility through reduced setbacks while lowering height requirements, looking at a density bonus for some units as you go through and redevelop an existing single-family unit with a duplex or stack flat and maintain the base floor footprint, which essentially keeps the same character of the existing unit. And also setting a gross floor area maximum of 1,200 square feet gives you a density bonus for just cottage housing. So on the left, you can see where those different middle housing types apply. They do not apply to every. And also someone does not have to utilize one of these. They can just go by the base standards. This is just an additional allowance if a developer would like to use it or somebody would like to use it on their property. As part of this process, we also established unit lot subdivisions. These would allow essentially cities should include these as part of the short plat regulations. And this process essentially allows a fee simple separately owned unit lots within an overall parent lot. The overall parent lot still needs to meet the bulk development standards that a single family development would. But the difference is you are now allowed to, whether it's through condomization or through some kind of common ownership of the separate unit lot or a separate open space lot on an overall parent lot. There are a couple different ways, as illustrated on the next slide, that you can have different ownership within one overall parent lot. So the overall big picture is it allows fee simple ownership of land for middle housing types. You can see a number of different, whether it's triplexes, cottage housing, duplexes, and a primary unit, or duplexes and ADUs. It allows a lot of flexibility for folks in terms of ownership opportunities and gets towards the Planning Commission's kind of stated goal of smaller lots, smaller homes on smaller lots. A little bit on switching to House Bill 1337 now, which is accessory dwelling units. The main requirement here is it now requires cities to allow up to 2 ADUs on a single family zone property. It removes the owner occupancy requirement, which Kenmore did previously have an owner occupancy requirement for either the primary or the ADU. It says that cities can't regulate ADUs below 1,000 square feet, and it removes any public street improvement requirements. I don't know if this is on the slide, one of the slides, so I'll say it here. Accessory dwelling units, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, do also count towards unit density, as we discussed earlier in terms of that unit density requirement. So this is applies to all residential development in R4 and R6 zones. This is some back to affordability requirements. I think this goes to Michael's slides now. Yep. You want me to pass over these and have him present them, or? Okay. Yep. All I have is one left. So next steps tonight, we hold a public hearing to public testimony, make formal recommendation, and ultimately code amendments do need to be adopted by June 30th or the state model ordinance will take effect. I will pass it back to Debbie.
So we do have a short presentation to explain the affordable inclusionary housing requirements, and Mike Stanger with Arch is online. So we're just loading that up now, and then we can have Mike run through those.
Hi, everyone. I wonder if I don't have the that one slide that you were just showing. Do you want me to start there? Because this set of slides really talks about the comments. Great. Okay. Thanks. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Mike Stanger, Senior Planner at Arch. And just briefly, what the affordable housing requirements or inclusionary zoning portion of this proposal would do in all R4 and R6 zones with projects building 4 units or more, then there would be a requirement that's equivalent to 10% of the new units at 80% that be affordable at 80% of area median income. if they were owner occupied, and if they're renter occupied, then the affordability would be 50% of area median income. Now, if the project has 4 to 9 new units, then 10% of that is obviously less than 1 unit. And so the way that this proposal would handle that is to say that a fee in lieu could be paid in lieu of the affordable housing on site. But for projects 10 or more units, then we would round that 10% to the nearest whole unit. And then those units would be affordable housing on the site. Now, Debbie, would you like me to go on with responding to the public comments, the written comments? Or-
I think we can, if we leave that till after, and now I just wanted to have explain that the background to this project and what we're actually doing. So Mike, if you can hold the response to comments till after any
Sure.
additional comments received at the public hearing.
Perfect.
So, Chair, that kind of concludes the staff presentation.
Okay, thank you very much to staff and our consultants. Appreciate the presentation ahead of the public hearing. And that brings us to the public hearing. Clerk, do we have people signed up for the public hearing?
We have 4 people signed up for public testimony tonight.
Fantastic. We welcome our community members to the Planning Commission's public hearing. In this forum, the Planning Commission does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the Planning Commission here is to listen. Tonight, the public hearing is on middle housing and inclusionary zoning regulations. Please see the agenda packet for details. Planning Commission will take action related to this hearing tonight. Please keep your testimony limited to the topic for this hearing. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you are here in the chambers, please be sure to sign in. If you are online, the clerk will call your name when it is your turn. All guests must address comments to the chair and city planning commissioners. The clerk will call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Due to time constraints and to provide fair time for all community members, we must limit each speaker to 3 minutes. We will not split your time with others or reset your time. Screen sharing is not allowed. You state your name and city of residence for the record. You may submit materials to the Planning Commission or the clerk in advance. Well, I guess at this point you can submit any materials you have to the clerk and the clerk can distribute them to us later. To make every person feel welcome and safe here, please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. This meeting is being recorded. We appreciate you all for being here and taking the time to give your testimony.
The first person is Catlin Sullivan.
Hi there, Catlin Sullivan, Kenmore resident. As you know by the emails I sent, I have a lot of thoughts on the proposed code, but I'm going to just try to keep them brief and clear. In the last meeting, you discussed 2 options for inclusionary zoning, one that would require it on anything over 2,000 square feet and the other that would put it on anything over 3 units. The representative from Arch at that meeting said that these would serve as caps on your new development. Under the first scenario, you'd only get units under 2,000 square feet, and in the second, you'd only get 3-unit developments. Planning Commission chose to put the cap at 3 units. My concern is this: if we limit development to 3 units, we're only going to get single-family homes plus 2 DADUs. None of this counts towards middle housing. Developers, however, who want to create smaller, denser units are tagged with inclusionary zoning fees, thus discouraging this type of development that middle housing was designed to create. I'm also incredibly concerned about Arch's fee estimate. To create their $6 a square foot cost, they used old and incorrect data that does not reflect the current housing market. If this were calculated today by City Council, the fee would come in no lower than $12 a square foot, twice what their current estimate is. I understand that this commission wants to encourage cottage housing in smaller units, but the policy as outlined today does the opposite. If you're truly committed to creating middle housing, the limit on number of units needs to be scrapped entirely, and instead, inclusionary zoning needs to apply to anything over 2,000 square feet. Here's the truth. Single-family zoning was how cities created segregation by income. For decades, municipalities have leveraged bodies such as the one that you sit on today to create zoning laws that advantage the wealthy and disadvantage the poor and now the middle class. Changing zoning to allow middle housing isn't creating value, it's creating equity. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Next is Logan Schmidt.
Good evening, Chair Banashinsky, Vice Chair Thompson, and Commissioners. My name is Logan Schmidt, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish Counties. Thank you for your thoughtful work over the past weeks, reviewing the proposed middle housing code and affordable housing requirements. We strongly support the city's efforts to expand housing opportunities here in Kenmore. However, we are concerned that certain provisions in the current draft, particularly around inclusionary zoning requirements, could unintentionally hinder the very housing production Kenmore seeks to encourage. First, we urge you to restore a meaningful square footage exemption, ideally at 1,500 square feet. This threshold protects the viability of smaller, family-oriented homes, especially three-bedroom cottages and townhomes that are critical for middle-income households. A 1,500 square foot threshold would also align with the city's detached ADU and cottage housing code sizes. Second, we recommend raising the unit threshold for affordability fees from 4 to at least 10 units. Smaller infill projects simply cannot absorb these costs and still pencil out. Economic studies confirm that these fees disproportionately impact small-scale developments, making them infeasible. We do support a delayed implementation timeline as proposed, allowing projects vested before December 31st, 2025 to proceed under current rules ensures fairness and predictability for builders already navigating complex permitting. Kenmore has an opportunity to lead with a smart, balanced approach to middle housing, one that expands options without placing unintended financial roadblocks in the way. In closing, we respectfully ask that the Commission consider delaying implementation of inclusionary zoning requirements and just move forward with ensuring that the city is code compliant with HB 1110 and HB 1337. Other jurisdictions around King County, including Kirkland, are delaying decisions on inclusionary zoning policies while still updating their middle housing codes. This pause will allow for property owners, builders, and city officials to fully understand how middle housing impacts the real estate market here in Kenmore and ensure that Kenmore's housing policies remain both effective and equitable. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony.
Robert Schwint.
Commissioners, Robert Schwint, General Manager for Village Life Homes, active builder in the Kenmore City. Here to talk about the HB 1110 and the increased housing options that are more affordable. And then the first thing I hear is they want to add more taxes to that. You know, to work in Kenmore or any jurisdictions, we have to navigate tree retention requirements, critical areas, stormwaters, impervious surfaces, floor area ratios, and energy codes, and now a new policy. Inclusionary zoning was set up to be an incentivizing aspect to provide affordable housing. Things that motivate or encourages. A tax does not do that. Current building times and current City of Kenmore permit review times for a single family house are 14 weeks with $44,000 just in permit fees, let alone the $25,000 it took us to prepare those drawings before we put a stick in the ground. A 3,000 square foot house with a $6 square foot fee in lieu of is $18,000. Most of these to get financed on a 15-year note at 6.5%. There's another $10,000 in interest on top of that. So your $18,000 fee in lieu now become $28,000. We can consider that when making these policies.
Thank you for your testimony.
Melissa Pendleton.
Hi, Melissa Pendleton, Kenmore. I just want to speak to this, couple things. One, I agree that we need more middle housing, correct? We need more affordable options. However, I think we are not going about it in the correct way. A couple of reasons. One, I get it where there's room downtown, other places, but your job is to protect housing for all, and I don't see that happening. What I see is selling out all of Kenmore to developers. There's a reason why the Master Builders Association is here. This actual whole concept was started by developers. It's been pushed through by developers. I actually work in commercial construction. I'm well aware of a lot of the movement. I'm aware of the companies. I'm aware of why they push it. You know, I looked online and right now some of these new condos are over 700,000 in Kenmore that are posted, the same cost or more than some of the small family homes or split family homes. And I mean housing for all. There are people that live in condos, there are people that live in apartments, and there's people that want a small place for their kids or their families. Quick story, my parents lost their entire house in a fire last year. They lost everything. They're in a small rental. They're gonna have to start looking for housing. And guess what? The only thing in their price range is condos. Because of the fire, my dad's in a wheelchair. Can't afford that. And they're definitely not going to find some small house if you have builders out here putting their money down and trying to buy houses and compete against small families that are trying to live in the city. So a sweeping regulation for all zoning is absolutely crazy to me. You're not protecting everyone. You're protecting what you think in high density for a certain amount of people that can live in a condo. That is not my dad after a fire in a wheelchair. I want you to think about that. Two, sustainability. After a study, 3 different companies went back to developments after houses have been torn down where they had to plant trees. 90% of the trees were dead. There's no regulation that says the trees have to live, that it has to help reduce carbon, that it has to help the environment. It doesn't matter. Take out a deciduous tree that's been there 100 years and taking carbon, put in a sapling, it dies tomorrow, it doesn't matter. So what I ask you today is to consider everyone in Kenmore, every type of housing, not a sweeping regulation that lets developers have an open ticket to all of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
And that's all.
All right. Thank you to everyone who has shown up tonight. It's really important that we have engagement from our community. I appreciate that you've taken the time to be here. So I'll now pass things to staff and consultants again to address public comments or public testimony. Responses to written testimony have been prepared, and staff and consultants will address public hearing testimony received tonight as they can in the moment. Commissioner discussion will hold until the end of the presentations. So I'll hand it over again to Debbie Todd and our consultants.
So I think we'd like to start with Mike Stanger from Arch, who's going to, he has some slides available which are in response to written comments that we've received so far. And I think some of the responses will also perhaps address some of the comments we've heard this evening during the public hearing.
Oh, Mike, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Here we go. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. And also, if I happen to cough in the middle of things, please excuse me. So I'd like to start by addressing the overriding concern about inclusionary zoning or mandatory affordability that we hear over and over, which is that affordable housing is a cost for home building. And if that's the case, then won't it drive up prices on other homes or suppress development? And my simple answer is no, not if you follow the law and do careful analysis. In Washington state, cities can't just add affordable housing requirements without giving some corresponding value to landowners. And it wouldn't make any sense to require so much affordability that it stops development. So that's why we do our analysis, to make sure that the public gets some affordability that people have promised middle housing will deliver, but not so much that no one builds middle housing. Now, unfortunately, many of the letters and public comments look right past the value that's created by higher densities and criticize the cost. So I'd like to look at both sides of the equation. So next slide, please. You recall that we modeled at least 9 different building prototypes on 10,000 square foot lots. We were trying to find not every possible middle housing proposal that might come forward, but some that would be typical. So if we compare the bottom line, the profits of 8 of those prototypes to building one single family home, and let's say that the affordable housing requirement is 10% at 80% of median, and that gives us an average in lieu fee of $6 per square foot. Then the fees in these examples range from $18,000 to $38,000 per project. Every prototype with the duplex, except the duplex and the 3 flat, are more profitable than the single unit project. In other words, more profitable than what they can do today. Would Kenmore get more middle housing without a $6 fee? It might make a difference to a project here and there. Models, like I said, are created to show the impacts of typical cases. We're finding that the 4-unit lots and some smaller projects even will do just fine, even with the $6 fee. Next slide, please. You received a few detailed questions before the meeting about the modeling. And the model is explained in full detail in a report on our website, which I'll mention again later. But the consultant that led that study, BAE Urban Economics, used Redfin.com sales to find land acquisition and new sale prices. And these were vetted at the time with a variety of realtors, builders, architects, along with other factors like construction costs, financing, and so on. And I realize that that data set is now over a year old, but the factors are all in relationship to one another. In the time since then, if there have been significant change to the difference between cost and prices, for example, if anything, I would expect the results to be somewhat better for builders. Next slide, please. Our consultants did a really reasonable job, I think. Amount of research within the building outreach, within the building community, as I mentioned. And I'm sorry that they didn't include everyone who submitted comments for this meeting. Our complete report with all the details can be found on our website, and the link is shown there on the screen. We did get one comment letter late today that showed that they did read the report and they raised some thoughtful questions. And I'm always willing to meet with developers or others who can advise us on how to improve our analysis. But we don't want to get sucked into some vortex of paralysis by analysis. So we want to remember that there's no perfect model, and that adding more and more factors into a formula also introduces more opportunities for error. There are no missing costs from this model. There are some that have been consolidated with other line items. The real question is whether the outputs look about right. That is, the total development costs, including profits and net proceeds. And we think they were reasonable at the time that they were first published. We've done some updating and fine-tuning for Kenmore since then. I'm willing to stand by it, but I'm also willing to update the data as needed as we go forward. Next, please. So one commenter wanted to use Seattle's inclusionary program to show that mandatory affordability suppresses development. Now, East King County cities have been doing this a lot longer than Seattle and have demonstrated that it works. And Kirkland and Redmond are the prime examples. So in Kirkland, over 30 developments have generated more than 50 on-site middle housing affordable units and $5.2 million of in-lieu fees from middle housing. Many of these were projects of 4 to 9 units. No on-site units, just in-lieu fees. Did not kill development. Next, please. One letter asks that the commission should recommend exemptions for homes of 1,200 or even 1,500 square feet. I believe that we showed you at the last meeting that exempting both small units and small projects would really cut the level of benefit that the public will get from middle housing. The counterpoint I wanted to make, though, was to the argument that an in-lieu fee weighs disproportionately on smaller units or projects. In fact, because the fee is fixed per square foot, it actually declines as a percentage of total development costs as the units get smaller, shown in this data. Next, please. There was another argument for raising the project size threshold to 10 units instead of 4, pointing to a new report about Seattle's inclusionary program. I read that part of the report, and I think it was talking about the viability of having an on-site affordable unit, which wouldn't be required here in Kenmore for projects less than 10 units. As for projects of 10 to 14 units, I can show you at least 20 projects in Kirkland and Redmond that have on-site affordable units through their requirements. Next, please. There was a concern in a letter that the draft code amendment was too vague. I'm anticipating that we would propose a fee per square foot amount to the council using the model that we've used so far, which is a commonly accepted development pro forma. So I don't think that it needs clarification. Excuse me. Unless someone wants to use a different method. But you do have other options. And one would be if you wanted to recommend that the code instead say initial fee rate shall be X dollars per square foot. And then we just start from there. But it really only, this clause only really has an effect the first time you set the fee. Next, please. And finally, one comment argued for allowing payment of the in lieu fee to issuance of certificate of occupancy or the initial sale rather than a building permit. Sorry about that. I do appreciate the concern for the builder's cash flow, especially very small builders. I drafted the provision to say that staff could require payments as any other development fee, and not knowing, for sure whether some might be required at building permit or some later. It turns out that Kenmore requires most, if not all, fees to be paid at building permits, including impact fees. So another thing to be aware of that is if you did delay it to certificate of occupancy or something, then the time delay means that the value of the in lieu fees falls during that period until they're collected. So we've seen that effect happen in Kirkland a number of times. That's the last of my comments or responses. I'll try to answer any questions that you have.
So I think that's answered most of the questions that we've received in writing, and I think addresses the majority of the questions that you received in public comment. Perhaps with I think the most comments expressed concern over the implementing a fee or the exemption, and Mike kind of went over that. So again, if that's something that the Planning Commission want to discuss further, we're we can certainly do that. So I think at this point, Chair, we are here to answer any of your questions as you continue with the discussion.
Super. Okay, so I am going to take the liberty to speak before opening the floor to commissioner discussion. So please bear with me for about 4 or so minutes. So I'd like to begin by thanking the community for their engagement and my fellow commissioners for the robust discussion on middle housing and inclusionary zoning code amendments over the past months. It's been an honor to be in conversation with such smart, thoughtful individuals who care so much about our community's future. So thank you to you all. Before we launch into our final conversation about middle housing and inclusionary zoning regulations before our recommendation tonight, I'd like to ground us in why we're having both conversations now. Some of this will be redundant with what we've heard earlier, but I think it's important for me to say it as it flows here. As we were reminded in the public hearing presentation, HB 1110, passed by the Washington State Legislature in 2023, mandates that cities allow a broader range of housing types in residential zones. We are able to tailor middle housing requirements to our community's unique needs in a variety of ways, including selecting 6 of 9 middle housing types to include, and using alternative compliance to exempt residential parcels along Swamp Creek, the Sammamish River, and 2 unnamed tributaries to the Sammamish and South Kenmore. Among other benefits, expanding housing types in our community will allow for the creation of modest-sized housing options that serve a broader range of people and families. Alternative compliance allows us to protect some of Kenmore's riparian habitat, which may also act as important wildlife corridors from increased density. Our Kenmore-specific code must be completed by June 30th of this year, or the state's model code will apply. The public hearing and recommendation we are making tonight are only one part of the process to get to completion. After this, our code amendments will go to council for their deliberation, as well as through some administrative steps before it can be considered complete. Planning Commission is doing our part now so that we can stay on schedule for our June 30th deadline. This is the context for our conversation about middle housing. And what about the context for considering inclusionary zoning at this time? As we've heard, when a municipality increases density allowances through comprehensive planning, state law provides that they may decide to capture some of the value they have created for affordable housing, either fee in lieu, actual units, or both. Allowing middle housing types in Kenmore residential neighborhoods is creating additional value for developers, allowing them to build and sell more housing units than they could under current code. In other words, in very plain language, if we institute inclusionary zoning along with our middle housing regulations, we aren't taking anything away from developers that they have right now. We are creating more potential value than they have now and keeping some of the value we have created for the benefit of our community. I have heard from community members, developers, and my fellow commissioners that the inclusionary zoning decisions feel extra difficult to make, in part because of uncertainty about how they will impact development in Kenmore and fears about worst-case scenarios. This is very reasonable. I hear and understand those concerns and fears. I share some of them myself. I do not want all residential development in Kenmore to stop. I have been told that inclusionary zoning will result in neighborhoods without single-family homes and that it will result in neighborhoods with only single-family homes. I want neither of those things. I want vibrant, healthy, safe neighborhoods for all of our residents that include all housing types. So far, we have been unanimous as a commission that we are interested in implementing some kind of inclusionary zoning in Kenmore. What that looks like has been less certain. The model on which we have been relying to help us understand what inclusionary zoning could look like and how it might affect development in Kenmore comes from ARCH, a regional coalition on housing. ARCH is a partnership of King County and East King County cities, including Kenmore, working to preserve and increase the supply of housing for low and moderate income households in the region. ARCH hired a team of professionals, BAE Urban Economics, to create the model. We have heard vigorous community comment and have had lengthy discussion about what data are being used to run the model. And while other data certainly could be used, the data that were used are not unreasonable. Right now, we have code amendments before us that exempt developments of 3 or fewer units from inclusionary zoning regulations. This was based on the ARCH model. We did not include a unit size exemption. We acknowledge that if the size exemption is too high, we exempt almost all middle housing development, which we did not want, but we could not come to an agreement about what the appropriate size exemption should be. That said, exempting developments with 3 or fewer units does address some of the concerns I heard. For example, it exempts homeowners who might want to do something like convert their single-family home to a duplex and add a DADU. Since that would be creating 3 units, inclusionary zoning regulations would not apply. I want to remind us all that zoning regulations are only one of the many factors that contribute to what gets developed where and by whom. Some of these other factors include financing, market demand, and the skills and resources of builders. It is our honor and our duty as planning commissioners to make zoning recommendations to our city council that set the direction for what we would like to see in our community. How all the other variables line up is outside of our control. Finally, I want to acknowledge that this body of work is complex and has required that we grapple with really hard things like change and the uncertainty inherent in decisions about complicated issues where no crystal ball exists. In the absence of not knowing exactly what the future holds, we have to find our way forward through data-informed thinking, making the best decisions we can with the information we have and the values that guide us, and then changing course when necessary as experience teaches us. I'm really very proud of this commission and our community that we've had this hard conversation together over the past couple months, and I trust very much that everyone on the dais tonight has Kenmore's best interests at heart. With that said, I would like to open the floor for commissioner discussion. Commissioner Vanderland?
I'll jump in. First of all, thank you, Tracy. That was a very excellent statement of where we are in context. I found it very useful in what my comments are going to be. Really just additional context, and this may be, I think, just following on yours. What I've been grounded in myself since we started this discussion over a year ago is what I think much of our country is dealing with, which is there just isn't enough housing. And affordability is relative. We have a lack of housing up and down the income scale. It isn't in any particular portion, unless you're at the very top where you have ultimate choices. If you're at entry level, you're looking for entry level home today, anywhere in this country, you're in deep trouble. And so this is what I think we're really addressing. In our missing middle, I remind people we're talking about just 2 zones within our city, R4 and R6. Missing middle and what we're proposing here, including inclusionary zoning, is not the end all and not the end of this discussion. It never was. In fact, we tackled this last year when we started talking about having different zoning types, intense zoning, middle zoning, and less dense zoning. And we came up with some recommendations. I see this as we're addressing the middle piece of that. And I think we've got some good work here. I think the fact that we've included a broad range of new options in terms of the type of housing we can have meets both the need and direction of 1110 as well as 1339. I also like the fact that we've managed to preserve some amount of new funding for truly low income and affordability that can be used to answer the lower and other sections of our income stream. So I'm very happy with what we've got at this point. Could always be tweaked and happy to discuss it, but I just wanted to share with you my thinking. So basically I've come back around to where I think this commission was with different faces a year ago, which is saying we need a comprehensive solution that deals across all of our city, not just within one section. And missing middle and what we proposed here is the first step in doing that, but we're not done. Thank you.
Commissioner Dorian?
I have questions for staff and consultants. I think so. First of all, if we don't take action here, does that mean that R6 and R4 zoning can stay as it is, where there's only single family homes allowed?
No.
No. So whatever happens now, because of state law, middle housing will have to be in place across any residential zones that have zoning that is below the densities that we'd be looking for in.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if the city does not adopt an ordinance prior to June 30th, the state model ordinance will go into effect across all residential zones.
So we're obviously trying to avoid that and have something that is more close to what Kenmore's looking for in terms of protecting environment and having some of the other things that Mike was talking about. Is what we're doing, is that going to enable the building of large condominium buildings across the R6 and the R4 zones? I mean, just asking, just putting it out there, would that do that? Is that what we're looking at?
It's
Or,
between 2 and 4 units in terms of unit density allowed on the site. So it depends on your definition of large, but it's between 2 and 4 units.
So it's pretty small. So then kind of gentle density, incremental density. What I'll come back to then connected to that, and the concern that I do have about inclusionary zoning as presented at the moment still, is that I believe there's very few areas of the city where 4 units per lot would actually be buildable based on the code that we're putting into place. With the information that we have from Arch, 25% of a 4-unit lot having to be an affordable unit would not be viable. And that's what we would allow in most of the city to get to that density of anything more than 2 units per lot. So I think what that means is most of the city, even though technically you could have 4 units, because having 25% of those units have to be affordable is not actually feasible, we wouldn't get it. So therefore, the only place we could be getting 4 units per lot would be within 1/4 mile of a major transit stop and in areas where we don't already have greater density. So that actually means it's a very small part of the city where we'd be looking at that. Therefore, the calculations being done on 4 units per lot is what I have the difficulty with, because when I looked at that slide that showed where there would be more profit or less, anything less than a 4-unit per lot was going to make less profit. So that's where I have some concern now. Not that I think profit needs to be the only mantra, but if we're using the math, I'm not sure that pans out. So that's where I want to be careful. However, coming top down, I think that $6 per square foot is a lot less than we're seeing elsewhere. Like Redmond, I think was $35 per square foot. So I think it's at that level, it seems like something that could be considered. I just wish when I was making this decision, I was firmer on the math, because there's a lot about the math that I still don't get. Like I don't get why we do the calculation on the number of units per lot, but then we extend the inclusionary zoning to just the number of units that are being built in a development, regardless of whether they're on one lot or not. So I do have some challenges with the math behind it, but I'm getting on board for a variety of reasons. I mean, one of the biggest things that I've got is there's going to be a dearth in funding for affordable homes at the federal level. Like we know that's already been coming out in news this week. We're going to have to find other ways to fund affordable housing. I think we've taxed our voters a lot here, and I think we do have to find other ways to generate the revenue, as long as that doesn't cool development and isn't too much of an onerous burden on developers who are providing the housing. So that's what's going through my head. I know that's not a decision, but that's what I'm musing on.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
Mike isn't feeling too good. So he's asked if he could hop off, and I said, well, maybe before he does, if there are any specific questions that the commissioner needs to ask, so that I can let him go and take care of himself.
So Commissioner Olson and then Commissioner Vangeline.
I'll try and keep this quick. Sorry to hear you're not feeling well. I have a question on what would happen for a development that builds 5 units, and one of which is affordable at 80% AMI. Would that developer is there any incentive for that developer beyond not paying the fee in lieu to do that? That's it.
The question is there any incentive for the developer not paying the fee in lieu?
Sorry, beyond just not paying the fee in lieu, right? So they'd be paying fee in lieu $6 a square foot on the 5 units. They've provided one affordable housing unit. Are they just
So maybe I guess the thing is they're not required to do an on-site unit until they get to 10 units or more. So are you asking if they voluntarily build an on-site? I
Yes,
guess.
yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm asking.
So Mike, I think that's the question is if a developer was building 5 units and voluntarily decided to build an on-site unit, would that get him out of the fee in lieu?
Absolutely, right.
Or have I missed the question?
That is effectively the question.
Okay.
I've got follow-up questions with this, but effectively,
Yes.
are there any cities or municipalities that have looked at other types of incentives to encourage affordable housing units for smaller developments? I'm specifically thinking of the 4-unit on a single lot. If one of them is affordable, that's a state requirement. But I'm wondering if there's tax exemptions or other incentives to encourage affordable units for smaller developments and smaller infill developers.
There are, there is a multifamily tax exemption for rental housing. It's also available for home ownership, but it's not used very frequently. But we just don't see very many 4 unit or 4 to 9 unit rental projects. So the Kirkland is the comparison for places that require affordability, from 4 to 9 unit projects. And those are almost always home ownership. And their threshold for rounding is 0.66. So from 4 to 6 units, they pay an in lieu fee. And from 7 to 9 units, they provide a unit on site.
Sorry, that's all I have for now.
Okay, Commissioner Vanderlyn.
Michael, thank you for being here. I'll give you what hopefully is a quick question, and feel free to follow up offline or in writing rather than now if you need to think about this. One of the things that's come through my mind is particularly looking at Kenmore and the rather small size of many of our lots and the configuration we have, particularly in the R4 and R6 zone. Would there be then an incentive for developers then to consolidate over time, which is what I would expect the trend would be? So I'm just wondering if in the other cities like Kirkland and Redmond and whatnot, you've seen anything of a trend like this, where you see developers buying up multiple properties, consolidating them to allow a more profitable, larger project.
Yes, I have seen some of that. In Kirkland for sure. I don't remember any particular cases in Redmond, but they'll do some, assemble 2, 3, 4 lots. Yeah, I guess so. In that Willows area of Redmond, I've seen that a number of times. So they can create bigger projects.
Thank you, Mike.
Are there other commissioner questions for Mike before we let him rest? No? Okay, thank you so much. Oh, Commissioner Dorian? No? Yes?
I just had a quick one. Mike, I think I saw this, but just confirming. So if we're saying an ownership, so a homeowner is going to purchase their home at 80% AMI, what is that roughly? I think I saw about 400,000 quoted for the Willows, something like that. Is that about right?
Let me look that up as quick as I can. So can I share my screen, or is that not possible?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay. How does that appear? Okay.
We don't see anything yet.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Mhm.
Well then, oh, I didn't say it. Push the share button. How about now?
Yep, we got it. Thank you.
Okay. So this shows the household income limits we're talking about, whoops. 80% of median here. These would be the different income limits for someone to be eligible at different household sizes. And then these would be, I'm going to say sample. These are not fixed sale prices, but they depend on the interest rate at the time of the marketing of the home, as well as the actual property tax rate. Excuse me. And home ownership association dues. But these other things are some assumptions that we make. We assume a 10% down payment and certain amount for mortgage insurance. So, but with these assumptions, say it was a 3-bedroom home at affordable at 80% of median, you'd be looking at right about $400,000.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions for Mike? No, I am seeing none. So thank you so much for being here, Mike, and answering
Yep.
both community questions and ours.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And best wishes tonight. Thanks.
Mike, could you send us a copy of this slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So are there any other questions that commissioners would like to talk through? I don't want us to make a motion until we feel like we're kind of done with our questions, because after we have a motion, we're really only supposed to be discussing. So I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to have their questions addressed and surfaced. And Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, I was wondering about the certificate of occupancy shift. So you mentioned that that could devalue the amount of fee in lieu. That still makes sense to me, especially for smaller developers, as a way of shifting the costs, as most of those costs will be on the new residents purchasing a unit. As far as the city's aware, or as far as staff is concerned, how difficult is something like certificate of occupancy, charging the fee in lieu at certificate of occupancy for the city? Is that reasonable or feasible?
I would like to follow up on that discussion with the Development Services Director to see what complications that would arise in doing that. I think you heard Arch's perspective on delaying collection, which could be, a year or more from the time of building permit issuance to C of O. But I can check with the Development Services Director if there is commissioner interest in that.
Okay. And then, sorry, it's kind of a follow-up to that. When you ask them, could you also ask them how difficult it would be to give developers the choice, and potentially they take the risk if costs increase on fee in lieu when they pay?
Okay.
Commissioner LaSalle.
Well, Jen, on Commissioner Olson's question to Development Services of if it is delayed because of the impact on the decrease of value of that fee in lieu, could you look into the ability to adjust it for inflation or other elements to make sure that there isn't, that we give the flexibility while at the same time not losing money because of that flexibility? With that said, less a question and more just a general statement of what I've heard, and really appreciate the conversation with all the commissioners, and really appreciate the time and the comments we received from the public. I think the two things that my understanding we're discussing here is first, middle housing. Obviously, we just need more options. At the moment, we have a very poorly densely, but not in a negative way, but just it is what it is, poorly densely populated city, and we need more housing. Obviously, since most of Kenmore is built, we are going to need to consider repurposing existing lots rather than counting on the ability to build de novo a bunch more housing. Because of that, I feel that the conversations we've had of increasing smaller units is the realistic approach. because we don't, the existing unit that's already the existing housing options that are already in those lots mean that we need to have flexibility to move around, because realistically, buying everything and doing a tear and rebuild is not the only option we should be pursuing, because it's just not realistic. So I think that what we have not only matches the guidance that we receive from council, but is also echoing the needs of the needs and the situation that Kenmore is in. I think the more contentious or the more debated element is about affordable housing. Objectively, by law, from Department of Commerce, we need more affordable housing, and following the guidance of City Council, we also need more affordable housing. And I strongly feel that we need to have that distributed across Kenmore to not further segregate people who might not be able to have market price housing in a specific area of Kenmore. There are already income revenue inequalities throughout Kenmore. Let's try not increase those further. When thinking about the different options, the option one is just the city will be in charge of fully funding everything, which effectively means we as taxpayers are in charge of funding everything. The option two is controlling the price of existing units. Not sure it's doable, but also that means that the difference of revenue for owners and for future builders is also shouldered by the taxpayers. So not a huge fan of that. Option three is we just force everything to be to have an amount of affordable unit. Obviously, since we have a smaller, we are going to have more on the smaller side of projects. I don't think that's realistic to have that, because it would mean that many projects could only be affordable, and that would be even more of a stress and a duress for builders to make it positive. And so finally, the only option that we have is the fee and lieu's and the ability to have affordable housing. I know that the fee and lieu's are not going to fully fund our affordable housing elements, needs, but it is a tool in the toolbox, and I think we should not deprive ourselves of using it. Ultimately, if the city is the only stakeholder who is paying to make affordable housing possible, we are putting the burden again on taxpayers in a way that our state already has a very unjust taxing structure, and I wouldn't want to increase that further. So I unfortunately, since there are as many case studies as there are units in Kenmore, we will truly only be able to see case by case once the code is enacted, which is not the most comfortable situation for me. But I feel as though we have the situation that we have made recommendations that match Kenmore's needs and that are realistic, with the support, of course, of our partners in Arch, et cetera. So.
Vice Chair Thompson. And then Commissioner Macias. Yeah.
Such an exciting topic. It's good to have a variety of opinions. I think that, first of all, to delay the collection of the fee, it takes investment of that fee and what came from that investment out of our hands. Second is, I agree that there is a rise in the costs of using that fee to buy affordable housing, CPI or whatever you want to call it. And I think there's also an issue of uncertainty. So what happens if the project does not finish for whatever reason, then we're still out the fee. So I'm going to go back to your question, and that is, we do need more incentives to make that choice of building the affordable unit. I'm not exactly sure what we could do to make that incentive valuable enough for the the landowner or the developer. I'm not clear about that. But what I am clear about is that we need to increase the number of units preferred on a lot. And in order for us to get into a situation where we're having a meaningful impact on the number of just opportunities to buy a starter home, even though the starter home may be $600,000 or $500,000, whatever that may be. It's been told to us by several different viewpoints that the number of units per lot or the size of the project makes a difference. And then we also need to go back to the incentive so that there's something for that developer, landowner to make the decision to provide less expensive housing. That that incentive little makes up for the loss in the revenue that they may see. Other thought that comes to my mind is about rental. We've been really putting a lot of emphasis into home ownership, just because because of how Kenmore is. But maybe we should think about that incentive. If it's an incentive to turn that into rental property for 10 or 20 years, what would an incentive look like? Because that's really in one way what we need for our folks that need the affordable housing. And there are spots in our city where we could provide more, we'll just use the term, more dense middle housing development. But what does that do with those people? Or is it walkable? Does it have access to transportation, access to services? And do we need to drive to get access anyway? We were discussing this earlier, and I liked your point, Edward, that, on Saturday or Sunday, they may want to drive somewhere anyway, so they're going to have a car, and and the whole thought of reducing number of commute drives or other kinds of drives is going to go away because they're still going to have a car, which then you have to raise the question of impervious surface and the development of the right-of-way. So those are some thoughts, but I really think that we need to look at, and we've talked about this, incentives, and I'm not sure if there's a lot of incentives here to actually move forward in affordable housing of any kind.
Commissioner Macias?
I just had some comments. I really struggled with this, the process leading up with inclusionary zoning. I was open to looking at it, to seeing what this looks like. Could this fit Kenmore? What does this look like overall? And I really struggle with that. And like you, Tracy, I had to ground myself into what's the decision that we were making in the very beginning. And that was increasing middle housing, increasing housing choice. That is first and foremost the decision we have to make and that we're tasked to do. I understand capturing capturing value with adding inclusionary zoning. But then as a commission, you know, we struggled with wanting to exempt smaller units and wanting to exempt units of up to 4 units. And then that exempted all of missing middle. So then I came back to, okay, if we are all exempting missing middle, does this inclusionary zoning work? And back to Mike's point, this zoning, this is not the end of the zoning. We are going to upzone additional units, additional in our R4 and our R6 in the next 20 years. We know that. We know it's coming. So this inclusionary zoning discussion does not need to be solved today. We are looking forward as well. So right now, looking at it as a tool in a toolbox, I have a hard time with that because we don't even know what missing middle looks like in the city of Kenmore. We have none of it now. So if we put this on and it stagnates, what do? Do we back that off? We're out 2 years of potential units that we could be building. So I hesitate going down that road. If we lose 2 or 3 projects, that 2 or 3 projects, if I'm looking at 16 years and 50 affordable units right there. So if we don't, and we continue with missing middle and we stimulate builders and we use an incentive to drive incentive and drive building to Kenmore, then we add it. Then we say, we've captured it. We know how to do it. The builders know how to build on the small lots. They know how to build with constraints. Capture it then. I had a really difficult time with this because I know as an incentive, regulation and cost is not an incentive. And as we can see in Kenmore, it's slow to build here. And we want to promote and stimulate as much as possible. I just had a tough time with trying to make this inclusionary zoning fit into our box. And is it the right time? I don't think it is.
Commissioner LaSalle?
I really appreciate that. I think the big issue that we're all dealing with is we don't have a crystal ball, right? And so knowing the crystal ball is this, if we knew, hey, easy. I understand. I think what drives me to, while I agree with your comments to nonetheless support inclusionary zoning is, first of all, the impact of, based on the calculations, or at least what I understood from Arch, so if I misunderstood, that's on me, the impact for builders is going to be a couple of tens of thousands of dollars at best for properties that will be sold for hundreds of thousands to close to $1 million. And so I am hoping that the margins on those projects are not so thin that that couple of tens of thousands will be there, and potentially we'll look into development services if there can be added flexibility to make sure that it is not fronting the money at a time where there's no revenue coming in, for sure. And also to kind of use the reverse argument, not only do we need to increase density, we also need to increase affordable housing, both with equal importance, both because of legal mandates on top of city council direction. If we don't collect that money and we kind of kickstart density but not promote affordable housing, we're back to having the city champion and fund all of affordable housing projects. We saw how complicated those affordable housing projects are, especially in the lower AMI. And all the projects that would be developed, for example, in those 2 years, would kind of, that's money the city, not we, but the city would never collect. And so afterwards, it would be too late, at least for those properties and for those units. So considering that it is a moderate impact, hopefully. Obviously, the most moderate of impacts is no impact whatsoever. But there is a moderate impact in that if we don't leverage it now, we're back to asking taxpayers to support the entirety of affordable housing projects. It feels as though it's a risk. I will side with you 100%. It is a risk of, I hope it doesn't impact the builder's ability to densify Kenmore, because we need that density. But I feel as though it's a risk that's worth making.
We've got Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Vanderlyn, Vice Chair Thompson, and then Commissioner Dorian. Do you want to be added, Commissioner Macias? No.
All right, this is a question for staff that I wish I'd asked Mike, but I was trying not to keep him here when he's not feeling well. So currently we're proposing implementing this in December. So lots that are, or developments that are approved and ready to build invested prior to December 31st are exempt. How far are we able to defer that with this upzone? Are we able to choose to wait on this decision a number of years, or say a year, to provide more time for data in Kenmore specifically? I've got mixed feelings on that. I'm just really would want to know the answer more than anything. So.
I don't know if there are any rules to dictate a certain period of time. So I guess that's the question is, could you extend the delay for implementation beyond December? Could you extend it however longer, 18 months, 2 years or whatever? And would that still, I guess there are two questions. Legally then still tie it to the increase in capacity, so sort of legally procedural question. I think it's both those two things. So I would need to do a little bit more research on that around the impact of delay. I think the reason that we chose the end of December was it gives the opportunity for folks who are currently thinking of applying for an application between now and the end of the year to get vested to the current regulations. And it also gives time that sort of puts people on notice that things are coming in the new year. Again, the more you delay that, the less fees you're collecting. So it's where to create that balance. But I can certainly find out if there are any, procedural or legal limitations on timing of implementation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vanderlyn?
Yes, I want to take us back to the question of discussion around incentives. I think we have to remind ourselves of what the current state is. There is no missing middle in Kenmore or much of outside of cities that have actually employed missing middle right now. What missing middle implementation does is it provides the incentive, because today there is no developable or very little developable land out there. So the opportunity for a developer or investor to make profit today is limited by the fact that there just isn't that much developable land. With the implementation of missing middle, you open up new opportunities and new scope. That means there's profit there. The other side of this, and this is what 1035 is really, 1110 is trying to accomplish here, is saying, well, there is value in here that's being created by government action. Why shouldn't the public benefit in some way, in some portion from that? And that's when we get into what I think we're calling inclusionary. Would some percentage of that be able to come back? We can talk about other incentives on top of that, but at that point, I begin to think we get diminishing returns. Do we want to allow more units per lot by sacrificing the amount of impervious surface, by increasing size, decreasing setbacks? What's the public advantage to that? I think we've already captured most of the public advantage by implementing or allowing missing middle to begin with. And I think there's a case there for the public to say we want to capture some of that in order to be able to fund more affordable housing for lower income groups. And I think I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, because we can focus our attention on the other piece. Oh, well, we're going to be less profit because of in lieu of, or less profit because we're going to have to provide an affordable unit. But the profit's already there. And we're talking about as a reduction from the profit that was originally created. And being able to have it going up to 4 units, you actually get additional profit because you've got an additional unit there. So I think we have to measure that. I think that's what Arch's analysis takes us to. I think there's some real lessons there about where the profitability really and what becomes a feasible project. Too small, it's not going to be there. Too large, it's not going to be compatible with what we want to have in our R4 and R6. So I just want to leave that out there so people don't lose sight of the incentives that are already built and baked into this.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Well, I'm always impressed with Commissioner Vanderleen, our numbers guy. And I think you said it very well, and just wanted to pat you on the back there. That wasn't in my notes, but I liked it. So one of the things that I remember very clearly about a couple public hearings in front of the city council is some of our neighbors, and I say some, not all, okay, I want to be very clear about that. When they started talking about whenever we talk about something other than inclusionary fees and zoning for raising funds, if we did have to be a city where we had to come up with our own funding, well, that's what these folks would call a tax. And we've already heard a lot of not so good thoughts about another tax in Kenmore. So, and I think that inclusionary zoning or that type of affordable housing tax on property or building, I don't call that a tax. I think that's a cost of doing business in Kenmore, which is different than every single person and every single lot being taxed like we are already. To raise our property taxes is not something that would go over very well, and I personally wouldn't want to be sitting on the city council and suggesting that. And it's also a fairness issue. As been pointed out, there's money being made. There's increase in valuation and folks' inheritance and other issues with all of this increase in property values. And so it's a matter of fairness, is that those folks that are getting the benefit, whether the developer or the landowner, they should be paying some of the price for affordable housing that is not happening because of what they're building. Now, I'll even go so far to say, well, we're kind of missing a boat here about inclusionary zoning. We haven't even thought about the folks that just take an empty lot and put a single family home on it, and that we're losing the opportunity for middle housing. So why wouldn't developers or whomever pay a similar fee for building a single family home on a missing middle type of lot? You know, I mean, that is going away. That option to increase our density is going away with a single family lot. Now, I know that's being out there a bit, but I think if you think about it a little while, it's a choice. It's a choice. And I'm not talking about, you know, getting rid of your old house and building a new one. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about empty lots and doing that type of thing. So that's the two thoughts that I have to say, but I agree, we need to put this inclusionary cost now, and I think our numbers guy there, Commissioner Numbers, pointed it out very well why we should do this. And I don't want to be one talking to the city council about citywide property tax increase or anything else just to buy affordable housing. There's got to be some other ways to do it, and this is one of the ways.
Commissioner Dorian?
I got a few things that are questions and a few things that are comments. And so I'll start with the one that I should have asked a long time ago, and hopefully Debbie and Todd won't hate me. So given the new law, I'm interested, so obviously we've handled our R1, R4, R6. Why did we not have to look at R12? Because it's within quarter of a mile of transit, it would seem to not have as much density as it would need to. If we can have 4 units per lot elsewhere, R12 is only 2 units per lot. So just that just came up. Sorry, I should have asked it a long time ago. But why was there a reason not to look at R12?
That we can confirm, but I believe it's because R12 already allows multifamily.
Correct.
Okay. So then other things, so questions. So the neighborhood benefit, just to look at this in terms of how we are potentially doing things in opposition to each other at the moment. So the neighborhood benefit that would allow the density bonus of 2 units if the developer kept the base footprint of the existing house but built a duplex. I would assume that if they do that and they build the 2 units that they've got the density bonus for, they then hit the inclusionary zoning.
They would hit the 4 units.
Yeah. So there are some things I think at the moment we are perhaps unintentionally having a benefit in one area that then has a disincentive, however small, in a different area. So just making that point as we think about this. However, the other side of the equation, so what Vice Commissioner Thompson was suggesting, or Vice Chair Thompson, sorry, he's not a Vice Commissioner, he's a Vice Chair. So about making it the same for any development. There's value to thinking about that, because one thing that we didn't dig into a lot is the tendency of having split projects. So if we allow up to 3, then what we might see happening is that there is a project of 3 houses, and then there's another project with the same developer for another 3 houses. That's different. And I know we briefly touched on how that might be handled, but I don't think we got deep into how that would actually be managed in reality. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the gentrification. So this was my big thing right from the beginning, is we want intentional development. We definitely want to increase housing choice in Kenmore. The challenge that we have is what we see being built a lot already are luxury townhomes, which are really gentrifying the area. And what I think we want to make sure that we don't do is just extend the opportunity for luxury townhome development. And that's why I'm still keen on a smaller square footage, either exemption or some other way of incenting smaller square footage. Because just as I look at the moment, there are some townhomes about a quarter of a mile that way that are about 1,800 square foot, and they sell for 800,000. There's some about a mile that way that are 2,000 square foot, and they sell for about 900 to 1 million. And then there's some north that way, just north of Kenmore Middle School, that are 2,200, and they're selling for like 1.2 million. So there is a difference as you start to get up in that square footage as to what we're seeing in terms of pushing other community out. So public comment mentioned this tonight, or somebody mentioned it tonight. We have still our manufactured home communities next to us, but next to them now, just on my drive in, are 4-story luxury townhomes going in. So that's my concern. There's not really a question, but my concern is, have we done enough to make sure that as we're extending housing choice, we're not gentrifying and pushing some of our existing neighbors out? One last comment, like Colombo here, one last thing. So the 25% rule as well that we've got. So affordable housing, if somebody wants to have 4 units per lot, so that density bonus beyond quarter of a mile of a major transit stop, 25% of those units have to be affordable, and we're not giving an in lieu option. So it means that a developer would have to build 3 units at market price, and then one that would be affordable at the 80% if it's going to be purchase, or 60% if it's going to be rental. So for what Mike was showing, that would mean that unit would have to be sold at around about 400,000. When I think based on those prices I was saying for the townhomes, probably the lowest market price we're going to get is 800,000, so like double that. So as I said, I have a concern about whether that is feasible. However, on perhaps the plus side of that, not feasible for a for-profit developer, but what it perhaps does is enable some land to be held aside for non-profit developers, like say Habitat for Humanity, that have built these sorts of middle housing communities. So again, I'm sort of in two minds, because it would be good if we could partner with for-profit developers to increase affordable housing stock. As we've stated it, I'm not sure that's going to happen just because of the market realities of that price differential. But if we are effectively incenting non-profit developers to look at Kenmore and retaining some land for them, that's kind of interesting to me as well. That's it. That was a lot.
Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, something else I wanted to bring up, kind of going off Commissioner Dorian's comments, are around unit sizes, because I think it's understandable why we've seen larger luxury townhomes. When your fixed costs are as high as they are, and fee in lieu is going to effectively increase that to some amount because you have to have some reasonable amount of space to live, you have to make that up somewhere. And if the only place you make that up is basically by providing larger luxury homes where you're charging potentially the same amount or actually less per square foot than a smaller home, but you're able to charge a lot more for the entire house, that's how you get your margins back. And I'm concerned that what we will do will incent effectively more luxury townhomes, and we'll pay the fee in lieu, and we won't see some of this more affordable housing mixed in with these neighborhoods. So we'll see luxury townhomes where it's all people who can afford luxury townhomes, and we won't see affordable townhomes in those areas. You have to offset it somewhere. And if you have $40,000 in fixed costs and you've got a profit margin of, I don't know, $100 a square foot arbitrarily, you're building a bigger home. And if you increase those fixed costs, you have to build a bigger home to sell it, or you have to lower price. And if you can't lower price because your input costs are set, you're stuck. And then you don't build anything. And I think that's the concern Commissioner Macias brought up earlier. On the other side of that, we also know that some of those costs are quantized. For each new unit you add utility connections, you add additional costs on that front. We've had people message in and say, hey, we don't necessarily want to build 2 units because we can make more money building the same size building, but instead of having 2 units, we only pay for 1 kitchen, we only pay for 1 utility connection, we only pay for the amount of utilities and size of utilities required for that 1 larger building than 2. And I think what we are trying to do as a commission is, or at least what I would hope we do, is try and level the playing field there a little bit, such that the rational decision for a developer is to build 2 units or build as many units as they can on a lot, while meeting other bulk requirements, impervious surface area, et cetera, rather than going with building 1 unit or a luxury unit every time. And that's the concern I have right now. And that's part of why I brought up previously, 1,200 square feet exemption for developments under that size. I think there are some concerns around that in terms of revenues that can be brought in. And does that basically gut the inclusionary zoning policy? And as a result, it's not effective and you only see buildings that size, which also is not necessarily what I want, because I would ideally like a diverse range of housing options. We had someone message in who is an architect in City of Kenmore. And they also mentioned the idea of raising the cottage housing size from 1,200 square feet to 1,350. I personally, regardless of what we think about inclusionary zoning, I like the idea of increasing that to allow for 3-bedroom cottages. And then we don't go above that, hit that minimum, make that an option, but don't require it. Yeah, and I've spoken with a couple other architects and developers, Master Builders Association and others about this. And I suppose for me, if there is a development that today would make sense to be 8 units, it's going to make sense to be 8 units tomorrow under the current code. And what I would rather do is make sure our code, through disincentives and incentives, that they are going to put, say, 10 to 12 units. They could build 10 to 12 units either way, potentially. But if it's more profitable to build 8 units, they're going to build 8 units. And so I see right now we've got the stick of inclusionary zoning policy with fee in lieu. And I agree that we are giving them the incentive to build middle housing, right? We're giving them the ability to this value creation in that sense. I have mixed feelings on that because to me, it's still kind of arbitrary, since in the past, it's really pulling back previous limitations that we have also imposed on development. But setting that aside and treating it at the place we're at now and treating this as an increased value, we are putting an additional, we're putting a disincentive on this incentive that's a blanket incentive. And we don't have a carrot, so to speak, to build the lower income housing. We just have we're going to charge you money if you don't build lower income housing. And if you do build lower income housing, it really only pencils after 10 plus units. And I don't see why we can't do both, if that makes sense. Like, I don't see why we can't charge fee in lieu, and also can't have some sort of other incentive, whether that's multifamily tax exemption. I think there may be some issues due to scale on that one in particular, but other cities have been looking into some of those options. I think City of Burien has been looking into MFTE options and using that as a alternative option to, especially for smaller developments. That's really where I see it being beneficial, is from the 0 to 9 units, where it really wouldn't make sense otherwise. Beyond that, I think charge fee in lieu, require them to build it, it pencils, and it makes sense. Sorry, wasn't clear, just wanted to discuss.
Commissioner LaSalle, and then I will speak.
Thanks. I'm going to try and do 3 parts, but 3 parts short. The first thing is, I think there's consensus that everything that we have discussed around middle housing, not the affordable housing part, but the middle housing part, we all agree with. So yay. So at least that part, I think there seems to be at least unanimous or quasi-unanimous consensus. I think for the affordable housing in fee in lieu, I understand the risk of it is a stick, or it is a penalty, or it is effectively a fee, which might disincentivize building of more units. I think if I were cheeky, I'd say this is maybe a false argument, because no affordable housing is being built at the moment. And so there cannot be a future disincentive for something that's not happening in the first place. The issue of the exemptions, in at least my recollection of why we did the exemptions, is that we want a family who wants to remodel and increase density to be able to do that, because they do not have the financial means to support that. And therefore, that is why we want to protect it. If not for that reason, I would actually not want to protect it, because there's no real reason to limit smaller unit developments compared to the bigger ones, specifically as we are a city of multiple smaller units in the first place, as opposed to bigger units. If we still want to make sure that families are able to densify their own units without having to pay those, then we need to have the exemptions in 3 units because of the configuration of Kenmore, et cetera, is what seems to make more sense. So that is why, for me, inclusionary zoning makes sense. And while I understand the risk of, again, I don't have a crystal ball, and if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong. But it cannot be a disincentive for, again, something that doesn't happen. My final part, said I'd be a 3-parter, is more for staff, is this week, where time flies by. So 4 days ago, Washington State passed SB 5184 on parking minimums. And I know that a big part of our conversation was on parking minimums. And so I wanted to know if that changed at all our recommendations, or if there's a merge, or if those are separate because of the specifics of, I think it's only applies to houses less than 1,200 square feet or something like that. So shorter version of the third part is, what is the impact of the recently passed SB 5184 on the conversation we've had for parking minimums, and therefore what we will be speaking with City Council next week?
So I'll add that we haven't, and I'm not fully knowledgeable on the bill at the moment, so we have not evaluated impacts for that bill specific to the middle housing requirements that we implemented.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and my understanding on new bills as they are passed, that doesn't stop us from doing the work that we are doing now. It just means that further down the line, we will take that bill into consideration and adjust at that time as
Correct, yeah.
needed. Is that
As-
right? Yeah.
Yeah, as we've talked, and this likely is not the last discussion on middle housing, you're gonna probably take a few years to see how this, how the current requirements play out, whether you get housing, whether you don't get housing, and there will be different requirements that you have to implement at those different times based on new bills that come out, so.
Yeah, okay. So my question, I have a question and a comment, and my question is related to the concern that we will continue to get these larger kind of luxury style townhomes. Can we look to any other communities on the east side as examples of what has happened as they have instituted middle housing regulations? Have they seen a variety of middle housing types being developed, or have they seen mostly these kind of luxury, larger townhomes?
So I can't speak to the east side necessarily, but I personally live in Northeast Seattle, Northeast University. Seattle has middle housing requirements, and what we are seeing built in my neighborhood is a mixture. I just passed through a development, or passed by a development earlier when I was walking my dog that is a large single family with a detached ADU next to it. There similarly, a existing single family house got knocked down on one corner, and there is essentially a single family and 2 detached ADUs. One of those ADUs it's essentially a single car garage and a staircase upstairs, and what would be equivalent to a studio up top. It is no more than 600 square feet or so. They have the floor plans online. So we're getting a mixture, honestly. The development, somebody knocked down the development behind my house, and they subdivided, built one main unit in the back, which those are large units, and then detached ADUs up front. So I will say there is a mixture of units going in. It is, I've seen, I think, one example of stacked flats. I've seen mostly large unit and either 1 or 2 ADUs, depending on the size of the lot and what can actually fit on the lot.
Great, okay, so there's some anecdotal evidence of what might happen. All communities are different. I'm going to ask a second question, and my second question is, oh goodness, I forgot my second question. I'm just going to make my comment. My comment is that I very much appreciate all the thoughtful comments and questions that are being raised today on the dais. I think it's critical that we are thinking critically about what we are doing. And I am kind of starting to hear that a lot of them are getting into that like crystal ball space of like, do we know, do we don't know what's going to happen? And again, I think it's really thoughtful to think about what might happen and then evaluate those things against what we know. and what our values are. And I think at the end of the day, we do have to make some decisions in the face of that uncertainty. And we have to be willing to do it with the kind of information that we have and given our best thinking and our values, what we want to see in our community, and then be willing to adjust as we see how things play out. So that said, I am wondering if there are any more questions or if people feel comfortable moving to a motion of some sort. I'm seeing Commissioner Olson's hand went up and Commissioner Vanderlyn. Okay, so Commissioner Olson. Commissioner Vanderlyn, you first.
Were you reading my notes?
Me? Was I reading your notes? You know, my eyesight's not
I had
that good
the sa-
anymore.
I had the same thoughts here, time. We're pushing against a timeline here. And it's one that we have to keep for very good reasons. We need to provide the city council with our best thinking on this. We have many questions that can only be answered through experience and into the future. I think we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that we will be back here again in the future, a requirement, talking about these things. I think we also have to recognize that we need to be reaching out to the developer community here, and we need feedback from them. We have our own public policy that we want to enforce or we want to see succeed, but we're not going to do that by ourselves. One thing I'm absolutely sure of is the market will provide what the market wants, and the developers will provide what the markets want. If we want to accept that or change that, we're going to have to work with other folks to make that happen. So I absolutely agree, Tracy. We need to move this forward. It's going to be a place to start from. We're not done yet.
Okay, Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, this is kind of a follow-up question on my somewhat crystal ball-esque comment previously. What you described, I have been referring to as the Seattle Special, which is DADUs, two ADUs of some type, and a single-family house of some type. And that is, I guess, actually basically what I'm not concerned about it. I think it's a good thing, frankly. What I am concerned about is when you do have larger developments, what type of product are we going to see, right? So when it's a small lot that's being redeveloped, I would expect what you described pretty frequently. Could you speak out of your experience, anecdotal or otherwise, for the area in this region? For larger developments, are you seeing a variety of housing types and sizes as well? Or is that different? And are we more seeing it from the individual end of things with smaller scale infill development that we're seeing the smaller, more attainable units?
I think if I understand the question, usually some of the larger lots that we're seeing developed, they're zoned differently. They're zoned for multifamily units already. So if you look at some of the other areas that we talk, you do see townhouse developments go in where typically fourplex, fiveplex products, row townhouses, and you get a couple of them. But those aren't typically in single family zone areas. They're in multifamily along main arterials or zoned properties that are probably similar to your R12, R18 type. So specific to single family and where HB 11 and 10 applies, it is primarily these smaller lots. And so what we're seeing is unit types that can fit on those lots. And it a lot of times is either single family and an ADU, or we are seeing some duplexes go up. Seeing duplex and an ADU, like there are just different combinations depending on what each individual city allows and how their codes is developed.
Take a duplex. That sounds good.
There's one, I didn't mention earlier, but in the neighborhood that I'm in, there is somebody who built a duplex. And it was an interesting configuration. And I think what's interesting is developers are just getting creative with the lots that they have. And so having a code that allows folks to be creative and is probably the best way to try and get that mixture of unit types and sizes that you seem to be looking for.
Thank you.
All right, I remembered my question, which is, I have the sense that it might be the case that if a developer chose to build a triplex, for example, that they could make just as much or more money than building a single family home. But I know that each unit will be sold for less, but it feels like perhaps the total amount
could be the same or more. So I'm just trying to get at the concern that we will only see single-family homes because that will provide the most profit for the developer. And can you speak to that and tell me I'm right or wrong?
I can't definitively say you are right or wrong. It really is market driven. It depends on demand for those product types, I think. So again, speaking to just anecdotally, we're seeing some really large single family units sit on the market for longer because they are either overpriced, and we're talking sometimes in the 1.5 to 2.4 million range, like depending on the size, 5-bedroom plus large houses. And similarly, we're seeing other smaller units go more quickly. It just kind of depends on all the characteristics that go in. But the scenario you laid out, it's right if somebody does a smaller single family and 2 detached ADUs versus just 1 large single family, you could sell them collectively for more than you would individually sell a single family for. It just depends on square footage, number of bedrooms, all of those characteristics.
Okay, we're back in crystal ball territory. All right, so I would propose at this point that if commissioners are willing to break on if there are no more questions and you're willing to break on the discussion right now, that we take a quick break to allow people to perhaps use the restroom and maybe have our picture taken before it gets too late and we all look really tired.
We look tired.
Would that be okay with the commission?
I think we should vote before the break.
You think we should vote before the break? All right, so let's take, in this case, a 10-minute break so that we have time to both use the restroom and relax and then have our picture taken. So we'll come back.
Small letters.
9:07.
So is the picture first?
Are you okay with having your picture taken first, everyone, or would you prefer to go to the restroom first? Everyone's okay with picture first, so we'll do picture first.
Midterm elections. Oh, gotta have something. I know, myself. Oh, just giving you shit. Oops.
All right, we are back in session. So, if there are any more questions, and this is your last call for questions. Do you have questions, Commissioner Macias? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
This should be fairly, hopefully straightforward. If we're looking at smaller footprints, is there a square footage that would make sense that aligns through all development code? Like we have energy, right? We have energy credit requirements up to a certain size. We have cottage housing up to a certain size, or ADUs up to a certain size. Would it make sense that if we're going to do this, that square footage, if we're looking to exempt those square footages, that aligns throughout so that all builders know it's 1,500 square feet flat or it's X, and then they know that that's where their exemptions lie for whatever energy credit, right, exemption, or if they can build an ADU or if they can build a cottage housing. Does that make sense to put that into play at the minimum if we're going to look at that?
But is this speaking to the earlier comment on the inclusionary for a square footage requirement? I think there's been a couple recommended, and I don't know that there's any one true square footage that fits. I know 1,500 and 2,000 were both mentioned earlier as potential options. I think when you think typical square footages, 1,500 does allow you to get, say, a 3-bedroom, versus if you go a little smaller than that, it is difficult to get a unit that has 3 bedrooms and then serves families. So I think right around there is, again, probably anecdotally, without fully looking through all the different codes that would apply, could be a sweet spot.
Can I follow up on that? Okay, so 1,500 is a sweet spot. Like, last question is, also in that is that cottage housing, would that fit into that same sweet spot? The reason I go here is because I'm also looking at the mobile home parks in the future, and those run right-ish 1,500-ish kind of square footage, give or take. Could that sort of model be put into cottage housing, right? Could you use that as kind of a replacement for cottage housing should we ever lose that zoning?
I think it's a different, for me, those units are so different in terms of the type of unit that it's not really a one-to-one comparison, especially the ownership type for cottage housing and ownership of common areas versus when you do a mobile home park, it really is just your individual unit, and you're even leasing the space that you're on typically. So there's just a bunch of different costs. Size-wise, I think units, kind of housing units are housing units, and so size-wise solely, they're comparable in terms of cottage housing types, right? It's the same amount of space that people typically need for their needs, and depending on family size and things like that.
Okay, I'm not opposed to a size exemption, and I want to just remind everybody that the options before us were sort of either a number of unit exemption or a size exemption, and that if we did start to combine them, that we were really likely going to exempt almost all middle housing types. And I think that's something that we didn't want to do. So I think that is just to remind us about why we had arrived at exempting under 4 units, and we couldn't settle on a size exemption, but we went with that. And then I also want to kind of maybe ask us what problem we're trying to solve. I think that exempting units, developments under 4 units, I think solves the problem of not requiring homeowners who might want to develop their home into a duplex or add a DADU in addition to that. It allows us to exempt those kinds of developers. I do, when I think about other housing types, like cottage housing and other housing types, I think that those are likely to be made by developers who I feel like are less likely to be negatively impacted by the inclusionary zoning fee. And I feel like my understanding of things is that they need a size exemption less than a single homeowner would need an exemption from inclusionary zoning. So I just want to put that out there. Again, I'm not opposed to a size exemption if it came to that. That's not what we have before us tonight. But I just wanted to remind us all about how we arrived there and to think about what it would mean if we added it or changed what we had been thinking. Go ahead, Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I was kind of actually wondering along the lines of the combination. I think when we were discussing the combination, we were thinking of a either or. And I was wondering if we wouldn't it be more beneficial if it was an and, if we said it was this many units and this many square feet or smaller? Wouldn't that narrow down that focus? Because, you know, Venn diagram sort of approach. And I suppose my concern is not just for the homeowner, although that's my biggest concern, frankly. And I think where we're at today, I'm okay with. I'm also concerned about infill developers and smaller local developers that are in the community, that are doing the work in this community to build places that fit within Kenmore. And also I'm concerned about, as I've stated before, which it's kind of crystal ball-y, so it's not, I don't know. I don't think it'll always be the case. I think it would really depend on the lot and a bunch of other factors. But I am concerned about the math working out on a lot where when you're going through the pro forma as a developer and you're looking at what your benefits are, how many units are you going to build? Are you going to build 8 units or are you going to build 12 units? You can build 12 units or you can build 8 units, but you see more profit on 8 units, so you're going to build 8 units. And if we can change that math some where, nope, you're going to build 12 units, I see that as more beneficial in increasing housing stock. The concern I have with that is if they're $800,000 units, that's still completely unaffordable. So, you know, I see that maybe I don't know, I was kind of toying with this idea, and once again, someone feel free to shut me down here, but changing it to say 10 units under 1,500 square feet, and it has to be both. It has to be under 1,500 square feet for each unit, and it can't be more than 10 units. I'm not sure I like that still, but I just figured I'd throw it out there as an idea.
Yeah, I'm again open to that idea, and I want to remind us that we did kind of arrive where we did based on the ARCH model. And so I think I would feel less comfortable kind of deviating from that unless I knew that it fit with their model. And we know that what we are looking at does. And then I think this also brings me to another comment, because I think we are kind of still tending toward the crystal ball-y questions. I want to remind us that this middle housing and introducing inclusionary zoning at the same time now is only one lever that we have and will use to produce more housing in our community and to produce some affordability, either through units on site or fee in lieu that can be used for affordable housing units. It's only one lever, and we are going to have to kind of push other levers in order to really solve our housing crisis. This is not, it's not just this. We can't do just this and feel like we have done everything we need to do. We need to do this and keep going. And I think that we are really going to have to consider options that don't rely solely on market rate developers. I don't think that market rate developers are going to solve our affordability crisis for us, especially when we get down to very low AMIs. Like there's just no market incentive to build that kind of housing. And so I do think we need to be thinking broadly and holistically about housing and really view what we're talking about and doing now as one part of the puzzle. So with that said, I'll do like maybe a final last call for questions and then see if we feel like we're ready to move into motion making. So I'll let Commissioner Vanderlyn and then Commissioner Olson.
Sorry to prolong this, but you just actually teed up another thought that I've had as we go along, which is when you're talking about the truly low income coming up with affordable housing, I think we've already said there's only a public solution to that. And what I think we need to have in mind here is this a Kenmore problem? Or is this a King County problem? How high can you really solve this at a local level? And if you do solve it, are you simply going to attract more of a problem? I think this is something that really needs to be addressed at a higher level where you can leverage more income, more options for building where you have space and you have property available for that type of development than you can have in a city like Kenmore of its size. I think we have to be very cognizant of what our resources really are and what we can really take on. I think there is work we can do. And I think what we've got in our current code opens the door for that and creates something that we can take out of the toolbox and use, but it's not going to be the ultimate solution. It's not, the ultimate solution is not within our control.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, so this is something I've been wondering about. Is there any reason we can't include R12 with R4, R1, or I guess really R4, R6 in the middle housing code to allow for other types of developments besides townhomes? I was just kind of wondering because I could see, especially within a quarter mile of transit, if you're allowed to build 4 units on a lot and you go down to the minimum lot size, you could get densities quite similar to what R12 allows, or higher.
Oh,
Maybe not for tonight. I just
no,
wanted to ask staff.
Yeah, I don't, that's a bigger question that we don't need to address right now because we're really trying to implement the state law. And what you are asking is, can we go beyond that? You can always go beyond that, but that's really not the direction of where the Planning Commission has got today.
Okay. Commissioner LaSalle?
Just as a follow-up to Commissioner Olson, I'm looking at the city zoning guide and it seems that R12 covers 10, maybe 12 units for the entire city. So the impact of those is going to be super small.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Madam Chairman, I request that we move with the commission's concurrence to amendments. That are amendments and move to the next
Yes.
project.
Yes. Would you like to go ahead? No. Yes. So I am willing to entertain a motion if a commissioner has one to make. Commissioner Vanderlyn?
I'll give it a shot. I move that we forward to the city council the current recommendations for revisions and adjustments and additions to the city code related to missing middle.
I second that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Vanderlyn, that is your motion. Would you like to speak to it?
I think we've discussed this quite a bit. Just to summarize what I've already said, I think this is not the end. I think this is the beginning. This is the piece that we give the city council to begin to work on this. And I'm sure this will be back to us to refine over and over again over time. But I think we're as ready right now with what we have in the code to move forward.
Okay, so this is a time for discussion. Commissioner Doran, do you have a comment to make?
clarification first and then perhaps a comment. So when we're saying we're going to vote on the missing middle code, do we mean just the middle housing and ADU code amendments, or do we mean the middle housing and ADU code amendments plus the affordability code amendments?
Commissioner Vanderland?
Thank you. Yes, my intention was to include the ADU as well as the other affordability code amendments. So it's the total package of amendments that we had before us in our package today.
So I think my proposal would be that to vote on them separately, and that we would vote to progress the middle housing and ADU code amendments as one vote, and then handle the affordable housing code changes as a separate vote. Because I think there's enough difference in opinion across the two that it's worth seeing where commission lands separately on each of them.
I have a question procedurally. Is that, are we able to advance the recommendations separately procedurally, or do we have to advance one recommendation? Does that make sense?
Both have
I
to
think
go.
you're essentially trying to get to the same place. So, I mean, right now the motion is for all the amendments, and if that is taken a vote and it fails, then you can try separating them, or the motion could be withdrawn and you could make separate motions. But
Okay,
ultimately,
so-
we need direction on the code amendments, either as they currently are, or if there are amendments that you want to make.
And it is procedurally fine for us to make a recommendation on the middle housing regulations, and then make a recommendation on the inclusionary zoning amendments, and then make a recommendation on the ADU related code amendments.
As
rather
as
than-
long as all the amendments are covered, as
Okay.
long as all the code that you've had the public hearing on is covered. I guess what we're trying to get to is Commissioner Vanderlyn is basically saying, move it forward as is. And what I'm hearing from Commissioner Dorian is that he would like to separate it out, because I think there's probably more consensus on the middle housing regulations and less so on the inclusionary housing
Yes.
amendments.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table to recommend all of the code amendments before us. So let us deal with that motion first.
Point of order.
Yes, Vice
So
Chair Thompson.
Is it now the time to move amendments to the document? If someone
Yes.
wants, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
so if someone has, now's the time.
And Commissioners, since you know that we can advance recommendations by topic, you can think about that in terms of how you choose to vote. Does anyone, Vice Chair Thompson, do you have amendments to bring forward to the motion?
Somebody may,
No. Commissioner Olson?
I'm interested in increasing the cottage housing size for the incentive from 1,200 to at least 1,350 square feet. I'm open to input on that.
Okay, there's,
Staff, could I get some help finding the page and line number? I apologize. My what I opened is apparently not all of the.
I think it is page 119 in the document that was referred to as the middle housing and ADU code amendments. I think because it's the neighborhood benefit, right? Or are there other places that we're referring to the size?
That's correct. It's page
Yeah.
119, starting at line 14. Yeah, the table there. I think specifically it's the third, the last row of that table.
okay, so there's a motion on the table. Yes, there's a motion on the table for an amendment to the cottage housing development incentive to increase it from 1,200 square feet to 1,350 square feet. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for the amendment. Commissioner Olson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, we had a number of people message in saying that they thought 1,200 square feet is too small for family households with families that have more than one child. I live in a 2-bedroom, 1,100 square foot ADU. It works great for me. If we had another kid and needed another room, it would, I shouldn't say it works great. I have to go to the kitchen in the middle of the day if I'm working from home, because my room is where they go down for a nap as well. The office and the bedroom are the same. And beyond that, though, it's great. I love it and it's affordable and I'm able to use it. I see cottage housing and ADUs as something where we should allow, at least at a minimum, 3 bedrooms. And multiple builders and architects and developers have said 1,350 minimum to get 3 bedrooms. And so I'm concerned that if we go too much smaller than that, we're more heavily incentivizing smaller units. And I still think 1,350 square feet is not a large townhouse or a large single family home. You know, we're not talking about some of the examples David Dorian brought up previously this evening, where you're looking at 2,000+ square feet. This is still on the lower end, and I still think it incentivizes maximizing value for the community in those locations while also giving people more housing choice.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion for the amendment? Commissioner Dorian?
I'm just thinking this one through, so I'm trying to logic it through, because we would allow cottage housing at a higher level. I don't think we define the size of cottage housing itself. It's for the purpose of the neighborhood benefit where you get 50% more density. So potentially, again, I think this is an edge case because of the areas where we're allowing this, but you could have a cottage housing on a lot that would have been allowed 4 units, so four cottage houses. The 50% bonus gets us to 6. And I think that's where the intent was, to keep this, it's smaller than even a normal cottage housing development would be, because then we're getting into a lot of housing crammed on one lot with the other requirements that we've got for cottage housing as well. Because we then also, we're not mitigating things like each cottage has to have 300 square foot of private open space. Each has a minimum of 250 square foot of common open space per cottage. It starts to cram. So I think that's why we're not saying you can't build cottage housing that would enable 3 bedrooms, but I think for the density benefit, we kept it smaller for that reason.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Commissioner Macias? Oh, Vice Chair Thompson?
Why? If there's no one down there.
I think, go ahead.
I just want to ask a question for staff to make sure that if this amendment happened in the table, does it need to be amended anywhere else?
No, that is the only location. As Commissioner Dorian mentioned, there is not a maximum for square footage on cottage housing in the code.
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
All right, with no other discussion seeming to surface, Clerk, would you please take the roll on the proposed amendment?
Okay, we're voting on the amendment to move forward with all amendments with the additional amendment by Commissioner Olson to increase cottage housing from 1,200 to 1,350, correct?
Yeah,
You're
just the
voting on
amendment, just on the increasing in the neighborhood benefit table, the gross floor area for an individual cottage set to a maximum of 1,350 square feet with a density bonus of up to 50% of the unit density. So just on that.
Okay, so Commissioner Olson made the motion, and was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Macias seconded.
Okay. All right. Commissioner LaSalle,
No.
Commissioner Macias,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
Yes.
Commissioner Dorian,
No.
Commissioner Vanderlyn,
No.
Vice Chair Thompson,
No.
Chair Banashewski.
No. Okay, so the amendment fails 5-2. And so we still have the motion on the table to,
I just check, I think the motion failed 4-3,
No, 5-2.
5-2.
5-2.
Okay, sorry.
okay, so that brings us back to the motion to forward all current recommendations in front of us to council. Anyone have any other amendments that they would like to suggest at this time? Okay, seeing none. Clerk, and remember that you may choose your vote based on the knowledge that we can separate these out. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Yes. Commissioner LaSalle,
Yes.
Commissioner Macias,
No.
Commissioner Olson,
No.
Commissioner Dorian,
No.
Commissioner Vanderland,
Yes.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Yes.
Chair Banashewski.
Yes. So the motion passes 4-3. Okay. So now we're on to the next item on our agenda, which is to prepare for our appearance before council. What is customary is for us to have a presentation, for the chair to make some opening remarks, and then for commissioners to speak on topics that they feel particularly passionate about. So with that, perhaps we could brainstorm some topics that we feel are worthy of elevating in our presentation to council. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please, Debbie.
Commissioner LaSalle put together a few slides to sort of summarize telling the story of this. And so I don't know if we can share the screen and have maybe Commissioner LaSalle step through that, and that might be a good starting point for the Planning Commission discussion to see if that kind of captures the essence of the story and the reasoning behind the Planning Commission's recommendation. It would sort of set it up before staff came in to do the detailed outline of the code amendments. So if you would like to do that, we
That sounds great. Let's do that. Thank you, Nick. Bye. Yes, let's do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Debbie. So yeah, so the intent was very much for you to tear every slide down. But with the hope that the votes, that the commission would decide to move forward with the amendments as they were decided. This is very much not the details of what was decided, but the intent is to provide more color commentary on the many hours we've had to discuss, which obviously we can't boil down perfectly, but to give the understanding of why we made these recommendations before staff actually provides the details of those recommendations. So the first one is very much the story flow goes kind of like this. The first slide would very much be the intro that Nick has shared in a different, maybe more visual perspective of why we're doing this is because we have to, essentially, tied to HB 1110 and 1337. and what the key impacts of those two bills cover of middle and affordable housing and ADUs and DADUs, which require us to update a comprehensive plan before the drop dead date of June 30th, with the consequences of if this is not, if we don't build our own code, then state code will be imposed for us, which is why we're here today. So with that said, if we move on to the next slide, the key considerations are really split according to our conversations on middle housing and inclusionary zoning. The considerations that we have discussed, or at least the ones that have been represented, and again, this is a draft for discussion and for you to tear it down, is very much our objective is to increase city density while maintaining just what makes Kenmore, Kenmore, for lack of a better term, of maintaining green spaces and focusing on single families. And the key topics that I believe were mainly discussed by the commission was focusing on conversion, because again, there's not a lot of unbuilt units remaining. So it's really going to be, how do we make this conversion a possibility? Maintaining trees and green spaces, matching single family needs and code, focusing on smaller dwellings, providing flexibility via setbacks and parking minimums, and promoting cottages as a specific way, type of housing. One of the big elements of HB 1110 is also having the ability to choose 6 out of 9 housing choices. And the ones that were chosen were cottages, as we mentioned, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, and also ADUs and DADUs, which are connected to 1337 as well. The suggestion on just what are we?
Commissioner LaSalle, are you willing to stop for questions?
Oh, sure,
along the way?
absolutely. This,
Okay.
hopefully, less of me talking is better, as far as I'm
So I
concerned.
see Commissioner Dorian had his hand up. Were you putting your hand up, Commissioner Olson? Okay, so first Commissioner Dorian and then Commissioner Olson.
I just had a couple of things. The more pressing ones I think are on this slide. I think if the community sees that, like the quadplex stacked, they're going to assume that we're getting 4-story buildings. So I think maybe we should tilt that just for, switch that the other way.
Awesome. Yeah.
The other thing that I would suggest is maybe, because we're not forcing an increase in city density. That will only happen if the market comes in. So I think something a bit gentler, like allow for a gentle increase in city density while et cetera,
Perfect.
et cetera, and then, yeah.
Love that. Yeah, makes total sense. And the switching to the side, easy fix.
The only other thing I had was on the previous slide, this is splitting hairs, possibly technicality. Kenmore itself, per the law, does not have to do exactly what it says there around HB 1110, because Kenmore's only, per the law, a tier 3 city, and those are tier 2 requirements. We have decided we want to hit tier 2 requirements, but that's, yeah.
Absolutely. Totally, I think that would either definitely, this is something we can put in the slide, or something that would definitely need to be part of the voiceover of, this is what we've decided to do per city council's guidance, 100%.
Right. For context, this is 2 consultants talking over slideware, so you're just going to get.
We can be here all night.
Yeah.
Why am I reaching for my wallet?
All right, Commissioner Olson.
Pretty minor, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but just a spelling correction on the next slide. I think is there an I after the E in duplex and triplex? Okay. Is that just a stylistic thing, or?
It's a PowerPoint didn't underline it in red kind of thing, so
Oh,
I figured
okay,
it was good
okay,
enough.
No worries. And then other than that, I believe we also have cottage, or not cottage courts, courtyard apartments. Is that what it's called? I think those are the other 2 middle housing types. I think DADUs and ADUs are separate, but yeah, pretty minor.
Awesome. Yeah.
Commissioner Macias.
Yeah, I think we're missing stacked flats on there as well. Yeah, we're missing stacked flats. And I do want to be careful about the increasing city density, because when Missing Middle rolled out through all of the community engagement, the focus was housing choice, not density. So I'm thinking that you'll probably want to continue on what we've already presented to the community. The other option, the other thing that I just kind of noted was that we are also maintaining existing building height, which I think is really important for our community to understand, and that we're also keeping the same footprint, which was also very important for our community. The maintain trees and green spaces is great. If we could maybe elaborate into that we have not reduced impervious surface minimums, that would also, I think, is a big point. And the fact that we did we pulled some of the R1s out, I think is also critically important, that we are rolling with code, but we took the alternative code for a very specific reason.
Thanks a lot. So very happy about that last comment, because that's actually the next slide. So yes, thank you for that. And we can just, so what I'm thinking is that for the previous slide, we can just split this slide into to have a bit more white space, but to factor in those additions. The next suggestion there is, so this slide and the next slide are a placeholder, because what you see to the left is all of the different codes. And it's a very rich map, but it's a very dense map. And while you can see visually that R4 and R6 cover the vast majority of Kenmore City, it also would be ideal to have just R6 and R4 called out. So talked with Debbie and Todd, and there will be an updated map, hopefully by City Council, to go against what we have on the right of calling out the fact that R1 and R4 waterway adjacent parcels specifically are not there. So we really have the what it covers and calling out the what it doesn't cover without having the distraction of R12s, parks, golfs, public government buildings, those kind of things. So the next map is just, the next slide is effectively that, but I didn't like the resolution of what's to the left. So that would be the intent of what you saw in terms of detailing in the previous slide, with just the overlays that you see in this current slide to specifically call that out.
Commissioner Dorian?
Because I was looking for this previously, if it's possible, it would be really useful to have an overlay of 1/4 mile from a major transit stop on them.
So that covers the key fundamentals with the additions that we mentioned for middle housing, and then we would transition over to inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning, sorry, which is the next slide, I believe. Yes, it is. And the context is fundamentally, while we are not addressing affordable housing, inclusionary zoning only makes sense in an affordable housing context, which is the upper part that by state law, Kenmore has pretty ambitious housing goals that were thrust upon it across various AMI brackets. And that those, there is no alternative, and that echoes what we've talked about today. These need to be driven by the city. The only kind of adjustment that happens is, does city fund those projects entirely on their own, or do they have some funding allocated to them? And that's where inclusionary zoning comes in, to make sure that we're partially funding them through fees in lieu, and the possibility of having some affordable units created as well for more than 10 units. But we also wanted to make sure that this was sustainable, and that's why we worked with ARCH to enable a fee system that was not insignificant, but also maintain projects affordable for developers, so that we could have partial funding for those projects. In addition, the little green Post-it note is the fact that there is the inclusion of affordable housing. We decided to have that across all of Kenmore, rather than focus solely on the major transit corridor 522. The last or before last slide is really just some, yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner LaSalle. Could we go back to the slide previous? Okay, so Commissioner Vanderlyn and then Commissioner Dorian.
Excellent slide. Would it be, I think it may be important at some point, whether in the slide or it's part of the voiceover, as you said, making clear to the city council that these in lieu of funds would go into a city account that would be dedicated for affordable housing.
100%. I think the one of the struggles that we've had as a commission around fee and lieu is that we've decided how, or we're recommending how those, that money gets generated, but how that money gets allocated is kind of out of our hands, but is definitely in the hands of city council. And so that would definitely, I mean, we could definitely put it in the slide, or it would absolutely be part of the voiceover of whoever's presenting the slide.
Commissioner Doreen?
You just caught yourself on what I was going to call out. I think we need to say, in addition, the commission is recommending citywide inclusion of affordable housing, not that we've decided on it. Because
100%, which is why I'm definitely not suggesting I read the slides out. But where I put key considerations above to explain what our thought process was. And what really we are recommending is not this, but is what staff will be presenting afterwards. This is more to explain the context and the intent behind our recommendations.
Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, this is pretty minor. Maybe we just strike the no focus on major transit corridors. I think part of the intent that we've been voicing is that we're already focusing on those with the downtown and some of the other density or denser areas. And so this is just to spread that out. So.
Oh, sure. And we can either strike it or reword it. The idea was to say that in the two options that we had, one was just across all of Kenmore, and one was putting an emphasis on major transit corridors. We had chosen the all of Kenmore option. Doesn't mean that we're not focusing on other aspects for around the major transit corridor, just not for here.
Works for me. Rewording it's probably better, honestly.
Awesome.
On this slide, Commissioner LaSalle, could we include something that indicates that the affordability could be on site? The inclusionary zoning isn't just fee in lieu. We have options for the developer to provide a unit on site in under certain conditions.
Yeah, and in that little blue box would be via fee in lieu or developments itself.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, thank you.
The final slide, or before final slide, but the final slide that I feel is beyond absolute draft version, is more the additional considerations or conversations that we've had, which we decided not to act upon, but might be elements that council might want to consider. We talked about parking minimums and potentially the impact of what we discussed recently with 5184, but wanted to raise to council's attention if they would be looking to discuss parking maximums, as well of while we did decide the 6 out of 9 housing types with further reflection, if there are additional elements that they would be considering that they had initially dismissed or not considered, but wanted to reintroduce for their consideration. On the affordability or inclusionary zoning side, the one that we've been discussing at length, and I think we could discuss for the rest of the year if we had the opportunity to do so, would be the exclusion criteria for the fee in lieu or the development of affordable housing, and understand which ones they would prefer. The idea is not obviously at this stage for them to re-examine everything, but rather to help focus their attention on these are elements that were not addressed or were discussed but not decided upon in the recommendations, but is something that they might want to focus on more because it was elements that were very much discussed among ourselves. The last one, which super draft.
Can we go back to
yeah,
that
of course.
previous slide, please? Okay, so Vice Chair Thompson, do you have a question or
Yes,
comment?
I
Okay,
do.
go ahead.
Okay, so let's, by lowering, did we not talk about this issue about encourage density increases by lowering parking maximums? Did we not discuss that?
We did. We lowered our parking minimums. We did not, parking maximums are a different thing. I think yeah, so I guess maybe I could use some clarity, Commissioner LaSalle, about what you're thinking in this box was.
Yeah, so the idea is we talked about parking maximums, but if I remember, we only talked about parking minimums, whereas we made decisions on parking minimums. And so it was what will be presented by staff will definitely cover the parking minimums. but will not address parking maximums. And since that was such a topic, it was a topic that we definitely discussed but didn't act upon. Again, this slide, and we could remove this slide altogether because it is reopening potentially stuff that shouldn't be or is not in our recommendation to reopen, but is elements that if council is going to want to go into the weeds and cover specific elements, these three are the ones that we talked about but didn't decide on in a way that seems final. So that's why I brought them up. But again, if we feel as though this is confusing and not necessarily useful, this slide definitely can be removed altogether.
May I
Okay,
continue? I'm not done on that.
All right, Vice Chair Thompson.
So what I have a problem with that there's issues with regard to environment and other things that by opening the Pandora's box here, we're not giving it the full balance of the issue. And so I'm not sure about that. And the other types of what we should include in or encourage, we did discuss that and we came down with a decision, and that is in the that's another Pandora's box, which they, staff is going to put out there. I don't know if we have made a recommendation. We're not necessarily asking them to open the box back up. That's their choice to open the box, and I'm not sure if we want to put that there. The fee in lieu of exclusion criteria, those are the, we should probably more talk about what that means and why we discussed a couple different perspectives. And that is because it's a financial issue. We also felt that it definitely lands in the city council's area. And then you could give examples on that. I feel more comfortable with the green spot than I feel comfortable about the other two spots, because I thought we were fairly close on those items. I don't know what the other members feel.
Commissioner Macias.
Yes, I will go back to that before I lose that. Slide 6, can we go back to that really quickly? Just a thought here. So I know when we're discussing a fee in lieu or we're talking inclusionary zoning, either in the voiceover or on the slide, I think it's really important to call out specifically what those affordable housing metrics are. Affordable housing is very different to a lot of people. And we know that barriers exist below 80%. And right. So I think it's important to call out specifically what we are looking for in AMI when we were talking about the added affordable unit on site, and also when it goes into fee in lieu. So I think that that's super important. Slide 7. I'm with you, Commissioner Thompson. I think the first two, I think as a commission, we were all kind of rock solid on that. Like that was a solid. The third one on the fee, this is where I think that voiceover or as part of the conversation, I think we do need to discuss this with council, that this was where we had the most struggle with. This is where we had the most discussion and the most split on. 4-3 for me does not mean it's a slam dunk. That means we were very split on this. So I think that that's important to discuss, that was one that we were chewing on a lot.
Yes. Did you want to respond to that, Commissioner Lissaw?
No, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Fully agree. This was the slide I hesitated the most about. For slide 7, for slide 6 specifically, I think the challenge with this slide, and also, for example, the previous slides, is that where is the proper level of detail? If this slide was a standalone slide, I agree, we would want to pack it with everything we have, knowing, and this is not a no, this is a open for discussion, but knowing that we will have all the details of what do we mean for the 80% rental, 50% purchase AMI, all of those will be presented by staff. That's why I felt, maybe wrongly, comfortable with having a lesser degree of detail there, with the reassurance that whoever will do the voiceover will plug those details, but also that the details will be spelled out in the presentation that staff will do afterwards, where that's where we get into the meat. This is more the intent, and now it's purposefully not meant to get into the specifics. For example, I mentioned setbacks in slide 4 or whatever, but without specifying what it is, because again, the intent is that this is what we talked about, this is what we're trying to achieve through the recommendations, but if you want to get into the actual meat of the details, that's the presentation that staff will give. Not saying that we shouldn't cover them, it was just the trade-off of clarity, white space, etc. was done. I allowed myself that in this suggestion, which again, we need to discuss as a group, only because I knew that the details were coming afterwards. If that was the only slide where we'd mention it, yeah, vastly insufficient, I agree.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Dorian's next, but I first will entertain a motion to extend our meeting by 15 minutes.
So moved.
Okay, I heard like lots of seconds, so I'm just gonna,
Totally second.
so if anyone objects, any objections to that? No, okay, we'll extend our meeting to 10:15. Commissioner Dorian.
So on slide 7, I also agree that I think it doesn't quite fit, because I think we normally want to present like a unified front as a commission. However, it does raise the question, there is enough kind of difference of opinion on the inclusionary zoning. Is this the right thing that we would use a minority report for, if anybody felt strongly enough about that to bring that forward, or do we want to do it as an open discussion?
Vice Chair Thompson.
Well, I understand your feeling. However, we took a vote, and when we present in front of the council, we have an obligation to present as a group. That's, the vote is 4-3, it's in favor, and that's position that the commission took. And I don't think that it's our position to say there's a big difference of opinion on the commission. I don't think that's what should be doing. Now, certainly if you were to say, is $6 a square foot, or is it $10 a square foot, or $14, that is something they need to do. And there was considerable discussion amongst the commissioners what that might and should be, but we did vote that some sort of inclusionary housing in lieu of fee needs to be addressed, and as well as determined when it's to be charged. And that is not, we did not come to a conclusion on that because we felt that that's the city council's arena. Now, is that, I see that that's the differences between something that we voted on and because we shouldn't be talking our own positions in front of.
Well, I guess just a point of our rules, because the rules do allow for a minority report. Do they
Are
not?
you
So
asking
I
for a
guess,
minority report?
well, I'm asking whether, because if we do want to bring up well, this is the question, right? Are we just going in with a unified front? Or is anybody feeling strongly enough that they would want to activate the ability to use a minority report?
Well, that's up to you, but unless whatever the position of the commission is the position of the commission as a whole. And if you would like to file a minority report, our chair has done so, but has voted against a very narrow perspective. But you'd have to file a minority report in writing.
But yeah, I guess just clarifying that, because I think if we were to talk through this, that opens up that possibility of us not having a unified
Well,
position.
they already sort of understand that the majority is the majority and it's the commission's recommendation.
Yeah. So I mean,
And
that's
sometimes
my-
you're on the majority side, sometimes we're on the minority side, but we take it's part of the deal.
Yeah, I guess that's my point around this in general. Like, even as a voiceover, I think we're potentially straying into difficult territory if we say there are additional considerations where we weren't quite aligned. I think if we were needing to do that, it would have to be activating a minority report versus opening up discussion.
You want to allow Debbie to respond?
As the question of, so the commission can always present, that it was a 4-3 vote, so there's obviously not a consensus, but it was a majority. So the clerk can pull up the planning commission procedure, and if she pulls up page 12, that outlines the minority reports. I just want to be clear on that that there is the ability to call for a minority report. So it can be, when a decision is reached, a member not voting with the majority may prepare a minority report when the minority is comprised of more than one individual, and if requested, the report may be presented by Community Development Department staff. And then it outlines what the intent is and the rationale for a minority report. So I wanted you to be aware of that because this is currently what's in your rules.
Thank you.
Okay, can we go back to the slides?
Yeah.
So I feel like this slide would be an appropriate time to raise some of those things that commissioners feel passionately about.
Is this the only? How's this working? I'm a little.
Okay, Vice Chair
want to
Thompson,
explain that.
could you ask your question, please?
Madam Chair, it's one thing if this is the overview, but then there's specific issues like that should be explained at least, like for like environmental concerns that are important, that certain considerations that we had, and there's other particular issues that was weighed in on a lot of these factors that we'd like to bring to the attention of the council.
Yes, so I think that anything on the slide, for me, I think I would like it to fall within the space where we had agreement, and where we do feel like we can be a unanimous front. I will not, of course, stop any commissioner from filing a minority report if they voted against the recommendation. That is not my place to do that. But I also don't know that this is not where I would, if that were going to happen, this isn't the slide where I would put that. I think that this should be for things where there are particular things that we've really felt passionate about, and we might want to highlight them again based on things that we all agreed with, even though I know that we were pretty unanimous in the idea of including inclusionary zoning in general. I don't think that that was the disagreement. That may have changed from our last meeting, but my impression is that our disagreement was exactly how does that look in our community? What are the details of that? And so I think maybe we could talk about the fact that the vote does not reflect that we were all sort of unanimously in favor of inclusionary zoning. And these are the reasons we wanted to see it here. And then we could also, I think, say on the slide that it was hard for us to determine the exact contours of that. Because I think we all felt that way, regardless of how we ended up voting. So that feels true and right for me for this slide. If a commissioner did want to file a minority report, or there were several who wanted to do so, I think that is that's a separate issue. And that, yeah, that's a separate issue. Go ahead, Commissioner Macias.
So just as a clarifying on the rules, the minority report is noted 7 days in advance, correct? So if that's the case, that gives us 1 hour and 54 minutes. Is that, I mean, is that the rule? I think it's 7 days. It would have to be tonight. Okay.
It is. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ways, I guess, there are different ways to approach this, I guess. I think, thank you to Commissioner LaSalle he was really just trying to set up the story. And then I think the next set of slides, whether it's a separate slide deck or whatever, would be staff going through the proposed amendments. And then is where you can get into the discussion of your particular topic areas. And in that case, I think you could either, whether it's a minority report or whether it's the 3 commissioners or 2 commissioners who had concerns about the inclusionary housing piece, I'm assuming that's where the difference is, can then speak to that. I think it would probably be starting with like the chair said, is that there was maybe agreement that this was the appropriate time to do it. But maybe there's some concern about how it's being implemented. And you can speak to that at that time. And then other commissioners can now decide what other topics they wish to speak to the commission, whether it's the rationale for doing the alternative compliance approach or other issues. So I think that it doesn't, whether we don't have time for management, it doesn't preclude commissioners speaking to that topic to the council on Monday.
Yeah, and it is exactly those sorts of things, like explaining why we decided on alternative compliance, what our rationale there was, and what we feel like, how that we feel like that benefits the community would be a really good thing to raise. I know we did talk about it last time we were before council, so I think they already have a sense, but still it bears repeating. And then any other, yeah, things like that I think are appropriate for this slide. And then I think if commissioners do want to organize a minority report, I feel like that is something that those commissioners must decide on and advance outside of this meeting.
A lot of time and
Yes, they should be really short. So maybe that brings us back around to, are there things where we are in agreement and where we are unified? Are there things that commissioners feel particularly strongly? I said passionately before, and maybe that was attributing too much emotion into the situation, but are there things that commissioners feel that they would like to speak to, that they would want to elevate or highlight before council? Maybe when we brainstorm those things, those could be squares on this slide.
And if individual commissioners want to file a minority report, as we will be uploading the agenda, the 21st was already uploaded Friday, I would say we would need to have something in writing by Before I mean, if your intent is to present a minority report, you need to give council time. So if you were going to prepare one, it would need to be submitted prior to Monday's meeting and then uploaded to the agenda. Absent of that, again, you can still speak to those individual concerns about that and suggest, express your concerns, and it's up to council in terms of how they wish to proceed and if they wish to make further amendments. It's not over till it's over in terms of ordinance adoption.
Mhm. And even if there is not a minority report, I feel like it is acceptable and appropriate for us to say, we had robust discussion about this topic. It was very challenging for us to come to a decision. I mean, all the things that are true, and yet here is what our vote ended up being to recommend it. But I don't think that we have to gloss over the complexity of the situation at all. And I think we can still acknowledge that in the absence of a minority report. Just to let you know that I would not suppress that. This is all public anyway. Anybody can watch these meetings and see how much we have deliberated and how thoughtful you have all been and how much you care. I think that has been very apparent. So that said, and in respect to the fact that it is 10:13, are there any things that commissioners would want to speak to on this slide in particular? On slide 7.
Well, I think there are.
Yes, Vice Chair Thompson.
Well, I think one area that needs some highlight as the concern that the commission was thought about is the environment. Other one was the livability and I gotta find the right word, and how a neighborhood looked, or that it was, I don't want to make it sound like we're not DEI correct, because the part of middle housing is to allow diversity into the housing. So, but we also wanted it not to change its, help me, Carl. You know what I'm trying to say.
Commissioner
So
Macias.
that's another area that was
Yeah,
on our mind.
I think when I think about, right, being inclusive in housing, I think of being inclusive in housing of all housing types, and that includes single-family housing too. So we were mindful of the fact that this is required by the state. We have to do this. We want to do this. And we are looking at it from a broad view of, we are looking at all housing types. And that includes that was why building height and footprint was so very important, that we understood, that we knew that we wanted gentle density at first, and this is mindful of what the neighborhoods look like here. I think that that's fair to say.
And then another area that I think is worth a couple minutes is the missing middle housing and the illusion of, I'm sorry.
Can I interrupt you, Vice Chair Thompson, because I need another motion to extend the meeting? I will accept a motion. I hope this is the last one to extend the meeting for 15 more minutes, I guess, to 10:30.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Second, okay, anybody object? All right, we will extend our meeting until 10:30. I hope that we can feel good about wrapping up within that time.
Good thing we got our picture done early.
Yes,
So I'm going to continue.
yes, go ahead.
Okay, and then this affordable 80%, the whole deal about the rules for home ownership is at 80%. And the staff, and I'd say the staff is going to point out what 80% looks like. And if it's a rental, it's 50%, but we're not talking about low affordability here. This is not going to answer that. And we talked about this. We were concerned about it, but we did what the state law asked us, required us to do. And I think that we need to be very clear about that it's an important point to be made, and they need to think about it a bit. So those are three areas. I use the word livability, but I think got it better than I did, environment and affordability aspects. And I'm sure there's a couple other, there's the inclusionary issue in a general sense that they need to think about, you know. Well, he's, Mr. Numbers is.
Don't tag me with that one.
I'm done.
All right, Commissioner Vanderland.
Thank you, Dwight. I was actually going along the same lines. Before I make my statement, though, what I'm thinking is this slide 7 really belongs at the very end. I think that's what we're thinking. And having 3 boxes out here that focus on 3 different, what we think are the key elements to the work we did. I think what I heard you laying out was we want to talk about how we've sustained the livability as we seek additional density and diversity in housing. We've addressed the affordability, or if we want to call it inclusion, in this way. And then we've got our 75-25 exception intended to preserve the natural environment within our city. I think if we hit those 3 at the end, it doesn't have to be more than, a short statement of 2 minutes to say, we looked at this is how we addressed it, and we move on.
And if there's a minority.
And right, if there doesn't be a minority, that can come later, but this should be at the end, should be the conclusion. I think what's been laid out so far is intended to be an introduction to the detail. So let's let that flow through and not come up to this piece. This would be a natural conclusion at the end to all of that.
Commissioner Dorian.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here on Monday unless we go past 9, which is possible. Because it was originally going to be earlier, wasn't it? And I've committed to doing a monologue workshop with As If Theatre. So if it goes past 9, I'll be here. But a couple of things that I think would be interesting to hit. The neighborhood benefits, I think, is going to take some explanation to council as to what the purpose of those neighborhood benefits were, because it's not necessarily immediately understandable just from reading them. The other thing I think we should be aware of, like us, council had about 1.5 years, if not more, preparation on middle housing. Inclusionary zoning, I don't even know if they've been briefed in yet. So I think they're going to need a lot of information about that inclusionary zoning and a focus there. I could be wrong, I'm often wrong about what council needs, but just for me, that will be as it was for me, a bit of a surprise that's part of the package. So I think we probably need some explanation there.
Okay, are there any other topics that commissioners feel should be surfaced? No, okay. Are there commissioners who would be willing to speak to each of those topics? I think I'm going to be doing a lot of talking in the beginning part of the presentation, so thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think we have a lot of good thinkers and speakers here. So I would love to offer these to other commissioners so that we have representation. Any volunteers for any of our topics? Commissioner Macias?
We're volunteering on the code topics, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd volunteer for cottage housing because I think that's where I like the focus and I'm happiest there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
I would be interested in talking about parking and neighborhood benefits. I'll leave the cottage housing neighborhood benefits to Commissioner Macias.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
everyone else is going to volunteer for environment, then that's a big deal to me.
Okay, so we'll speak on that, Vice Chair Thompson. Super. All right. Debbie and Todd, is there anything else that you need or that we need to do to prepare?
So I've got, other than Commissioner Massis on cottage housing, Commissioner Olson on parking neighborhood benefits, Commissioner Thompson on the environment. Out of all the other topics that you raised above, who's speaking to those?
I think we had,
Inclusionary housing, livability.
yeah, affordability and livability were two that Vice Chair Thompson brought up.
Some other people.
Would anyone like to speak to either livability or affordability?
I'll do livability.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Vanderlyn. Anybody on affordability?
Happy to take affordability. Sorry, I'm happy to take affordability.
Thank you, Commissioner LaSalle. All right.
Right, we got it.
Anything else, Debbie and Todd?
Nope.
All right. So, again, excellent work. Very proud of all of you for being so thoughtful and caring so much about Kenmore. We did a lot of good work tonight, and I think, is there anything else for the good of the order? Oh, yes.
We're just looking at the calendar in terms of topics for next meeting. Okay, so we're at a point right now where we don't have anything prepared to come for the May 6th meeting. So from staff's perspective, we'd recommend that you cancel that first meeting in May.
I move that the planning commission meeting for May 6th be canceled.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Was that an aye?
It was an aye.
Okay, it sounded like a nay a little
Keep
bit.
people on their toes. No, it was an aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion to cancel our May 6th meeting passes unanimously. Commissioner Dorian has a question for the good of the order.
Just wondering about the Bastille master plan, because I know that's a lot of the end of our year, whether that's been submitted.
No, not yet.
All right, so with nothing else to come before us, this meeting of the Kenmore Planning Commission, Tuesday, April 15th, has adjourned at 10:25.
Hope I didn't make a mess of myself tonight.
No. Did you feel like
I'm very
that?
sensitive to you. Oh, wow, I was trying to get